Hello, it's that time of the year once again where we do the coveted Beyond the Vibe award show. Of course, the only award show that does things a bit differently. Of course, a traditional award show, everybody always goes, like, oh, it must be rigged. Something must have happened, where this person always wins, or this other one never wins, even though they do something amazing. But with this show, if you've never seen us before, we do things a little bit differently. So we have nominations for each category, but we decide right here, right now. We've not made any pre-decisions for a winner. We decide right here, right now, who the winners of each category are going to be. So you can see exactly how we reach that decision. And of course, nobody can say, hey, Ryan's been put 50 quid on the side. He's been handed something. There's nowhere to hide. So, of course, we'll be getting into that. Of course, I am joined once again by Lee Graham in a very snazzy shirt this year.
That's the award ceremony, mate. Got to make an effort. Last time you all suited and booted last year, and then I was sat there in jeans and a t-shirt. So
Yeah. Well, this year I've gone for the commune look. I'm looking like some kind of leader of, I don't know, something, or the Big Lebowski. I'm sure people will comment in that. But yes, we'll get straight into things because, of course, we've got quite a few categories that we like to cover. But we always like to start off with somebody to look to in, the next year. So the kind of the ones to watch for next year, for 2025. So I want to kick that off. First up, we have the Rambling Preachers. Next, we have Mojo Thunder. And then finally, we've got Black Lakes. Of course, Black Lakes was one of your suggestions there. I've not personally heard of Black Lakes before, so enlighten us.
Well, obviously, I get a lot of stuff sent to the radio show, and there's a lot of great rock bands, and that, obviously anything that's got a slightly different slant to it cuts through the pack. You know what it's like when you're hearing stuff, and there's a lot of great sort of more bluesier bass bands out there coming through, and southern bass bands. But Black Lakes have kind of got this Linkin Park new metal slant to what they're doing. They're sort of standing out on their own a bit there. And this, I hadn't heard of them this time last year. I really hadn't. And then I got sent a track of theirs, Burn, to the radio show. As soon as I heard it, I instantly got took back to sort of being, 13, 14 and Linkin Park and Korn. And the weird thing is they don't sound like any of those bands. It's just got this kind of notion about this slant to it. And I just think that they've got some great singles since. And it's as soon as now it's like, it comes in the subject, Black Lake's new single, Black Lake's touring. And I'm like, oh, I got to go, And they've been touring relentlessly. I very nearly had them at Just Push Play on the pre-party because we had a band pull out. People will know we had a local band pull out a few weeks beforehand. And I put a call out there. And initially they were in talks to come over, but it didn't work out just logistically and date wise, to be honest, because it was like 2-3 weeks before the gig. But they've really made a huge impact on me, and I think they're exciting. I think they're different because of this different slant they've got to the music. They seem to be getting some great festivals for next year already. And they've been on some good billings already. So I think they're going to start making those waves next year. I feel like next year, I don't know if they've got any more releases lined up. I'm sure they have. but it just seems like those plans are already coming together, and they really do seem to be making. They played at my friend's Mark Parsley played at his Shark Fest, went down an absolute storm. I know they've sort of been playing some other shows as well. Saw them in Norwich not so long ago, as they went up to a gig over there. It was a great night. But yeah, so yeah, they one of the bands when I was thinking of, who's making a real impact on me this year in terms of someone who I hadn't heard before. You know, it's just they were the first name that sort of sung to me, and that I sort of thought, has anyone done it better? And I thought, I don't think they have. Not for me in terms of ones
Yeah.
who I've never heard before.
Yeah, yeah.
From last year when we're having these conversations.
Another one, Mojo Thunder, one that I wanted to put forward because I think this year, obviously they've released their second album as well, The Infinite Hope, which has done very well again. But the thing that really I've really noticed in kind of the second half of this year, they've really started to pick up now. They recently played Rock Palace in Germany, which is like such a coveted show. Anybody who's anybody has been there, and we've seen so many over the years who've played there and then gone on to be like such a huge musician, right? And there's something about them where every time I've heard them that they offer something slightly different, slightly new, but it still sounds like Mojo Thunder.
Yeah.
And of course, again, they've done that again with this record, with the new one. And I just feel that they're building towards something. They've taken another little step forward, and maybe next year. We don't know what they have planned for the future. But I feel that they're going to be playing bigger venues again. They're going to be playing bigger places. Hopefully, they're going to come to the UK.
Nice to see them live.
We keep having this conversation with the Mojo Thunder guys. They say, well, we'd love to come over. we said this a couple of years ago. Hopefully, next year will be the year. But I do feel there's something happening. I don't know what it is. It's one of the, where you get a feeling with a band, when they've just got that kind of that X factor quality. I don't know about you. I mean, obviously you've heard the record.
I had them on the show as well, and it's an incredible record. It was yourself who got me into them in the first place, because I saw your initial interview that you did with them a couple of years ago, and was liking the sound of the guys while they were talking. So I thought, okay, check them out. And debut I thought was brilliant. Like you say, the last record going on a different trajectory, stylistic wise, but I think that's always exciting. I think that's it. Some bands we all love AC/DC, right? We all love Motorhead, but in some bands
that's who they always will be.
Yeah, they always have that stamp about it, and some bands will go off and explore different things. And I think it's dependent on how well you do what you do, I guess. But this one went on a slightly different trajectory, but I thought it was an interesting one. I felt like it was a more rounded kind of release for the guys. But yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to judge them fully because, like you, I've never seen them live, and for me, that's always where a band lays. But based on what I've heard from the albums and from talking to the guys, yeah, absolutely, a great band.
Absolutely, and I think that the big thing that struck me is they have the perfect attitude and mindset. That can make or break a band. If you don't have the right mindset, you could be an amazing musician, but you're not going to hit that next level if you haven't got that mindset of doing things. But they've remained very humble. And I mean, I commented earlier in the year, didn't I? I was saying about, they just struck me with how kind of professional they were from the get-go. So yes, I wanted to throw them in there. And finally, we do have one more. We have the Rambling Preachers, who, for me, have seemingly come out of nowhere this year. Obviously releasing that debut album, and it's done very well. And the big thing that's really struck me with them is both times I've seen them, on both occasions, I've struggled to get in the building, which is very interesting. Again, there's a similar thing where there feels like there's something really happening. Of course, James as well ended up playing with Jared James Nichols a few months back. And there's a real momentum about them. And they're definitely incredibly driven. I mean, when I was speaking to them about the debut, they were already talking about, look, we're planning for the next release like now.
Yeah.
We're doing it right now. Like we've got bigger plans for the next thing. And I love that kind of ambition of like, you know what, we're happy with this. This was good, but we've got something even better coming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of attitude. I don't know what you make of them. Obviously, you've started working with them a little bit.
Well, yeah, so I'm trying to help them out, getting some, some live opportunities and everything else for the guys. Again, I spoke to them around the release date. Really was digging the album itself. Thought it was great. Obviously, we both put it in our top 10 for the top 10 show we did of the year. And then just speaking with them, like you say, there was that passion, there was that drive, that excitement about when you're just talking to them, that you felt that that these guys are really invested in what they're doing. They're in this. Some people they release great tunes, and then you speak to them, and they're like, oh well, like you say, and sometimes it's fine to have that attitude of we're going to enjoy this for what it is right now, and we're going to and see what happens and see what comes our way. But speaking to the guys and to Ross and James in particular, I just felt that like they've got a plan. They know where they want to be in 5 years.
Yes.
They might need or want some help getting them there, and everyone who can shine the spotlight on them, please do so. But they've got a plan where they want to be. They've got, like you say, they've released the debut. They were already thinking about the next release and how they wanted it to work and how they wanted to portray that element of their art for the next release. And I just found it really exciting to have a band with that much drive, to take the opportunities they've been given, like getting on stage, as you mentioned, with Jared James Nichols and a few other awesome shows they've had this year as well. There's a magic to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really struck me from the get-go is they live and on the record, they have like this immediate sound. It's like, this is who we are. Like, it's like they've perfected it already on album one. And what I was mentioning in the top 10 of the year, which of course people would have seen at this point, is, when I said they're the band that other bands wish they could be, it's because of that. It's like, that can take years to get right. That identity of like, this is who we are, this is what our sound is. I've seen bands that have been doing this for 10 years and they're still, they admit they're still kind of finding where they're going. Whereas they've done it in like just a couple of years, and it's quite extraordinary. And I see some parallels between last year's winner. Of course, sonically they're both very different, but last year's winner being Hannah Wickland, who had big plans going forward, who had that identity from the get-go. And that's the thing that, for me, that I look for somebody that's really going to kick on. It's just there's everything there, isn't there? It's like you've got all your ducks in a row ready to go.
Yeah.
But of course, we've got three strong candidates here, but we have to, of course, reach a decision now. This is the point where, for those that are new, are going, well, how the hell do you choose? We have to choose right now, believe it or not. So we've got three bands that have all done very well this year, and that all, are showing big promise. Who are you leaning to? Who are you feeling, kind of, from your initial thoughts there?
Out of the three of them, based on, I mean, it's horrible. I hate having to do
I
this.
know. It's like picking your favorite
come on every year, Ryan.
Yeah.
Mainly so I can start showing off a selection of shirts, I think. But given on what we've been talking about, and the conversations we just had. As much as I think all bands are great, Mojo Thunder are brilliant,
Yeah.
Rambling Creatures, Black Lakes. I think Black Lakes have been, I think all bands have unmistakably, specifically, I think Mojo Thunder and Black Lakes have unmistakably got the identity thing that we're talking about here. Um, Mojo Thunder, I think they've got their identity. I think there's just many elements to it. And I think they're exploring those, which is fine. And absolutely, it's what an artist does. They explore every sort of side to what they're creating and what they want to create. But on balance, I think the reasons we've been talking about in that magic, and we've seen Rambling Preachers live and seeing what they've got to offer, seeing where these guys have got their eyes set on and knowing how determined they are. My thoughts are Rambling Preachers at this point.
I think it is. For me personally, I feel that there was, having been in the building, maybe it would be different if I'd been in the building for Black Lakes and Mojo Thunder. But having been in the building for Rambling Preachers, there's something there. I mean, I was stood next to Ross's dad, and after every song, he just turns to me and he's just grinning like a Cheshire cat because he knows there's something happening. Like obviously his son's up there, but like he knows like this. He's very critical. Like he's a tough kind of guy. Like he knows something special's happening. And I turn around and look at the rest of the room, and they all know as well.
Yeah.
Like there's an energy there. And for me, based on that, predominantly that and the album itself, I feel I have to give it to Rambling Preachers personally. So have we reached our first decision for this year's award show?
I think we have, mate.
We have. So right, okay. So the one to watch for 2025 and beyond this year is the Rambling Preachers. Moving on, we're doing best EP, of course. For those that didn't have a full album out this year, it gives that opportunity. Again, it was very much a similar thing where it's like, you've got an upcoming band that's perhaps has a first release out. An EP is often a first release for some bands. First up, we have Silver Roller.
And freedom has got a hold on me.
Next, we've got the 2 Ton Shoes.
But there's something in the way.
And then we've got Toby and the Whole Truth.
Make no sound beneath the blood-red sky, my friend. The shelter he below.
Well, Toby and the Whole Truth, aka some people will say it's Toby Jepson.
Yes.
Of Wayward Sons and Little Angels, of course. It's not. He's got a host of excellent friends on this one, hence putting it on the Toby and the Whole Truth thing. Writing back with Mr. Dave Kemp, who he's written for decades with. We both performed together several outfits as well, including Wayward Sons. But there's something really special about this EP. Now, for those who haven't seen the recent interview I did, or some recent interviews he's done about this, it's very much about the whole mental health aspect in his own mental health journey. And Lookout Volume 1 is the name of the EP. And from the moment I heard the track live, it was like, whoa, okay, this is where we're going. But like stereotypically, when someone's been through that kind of involvement in their life, and they decide to put it into their art, some people would think it would end up being a really dark, depressing, sort of dour record, and it's not at all. It's a very empowering record. It's a very uplifting record, and to do it in 6 songs. I mean, this is Lookout Volume 1, and there is other volumes to come. But to do this initial impact in 6 songs, I think says a lot. I think all us guys will admit that we're absolute dog shit at talking about how we're actually feeling in this life
Yes.
and sharing stuff. And I think there's a lot of songs on there that a lot of people will need to hear. That,
Mm,
someone who's had, an illustrious career and a very successful career like Toby Jepson has, who stereotypically people might think, well, he's been doing what he loves for 30 years and he's been in
he's
all
got it
these,
all.
he's got,
Yeah.
he's got it all. Exactly. People may well think that, but anyone who's battled mental health knows full well that doesn't give a shit about your accolades and what you've achieved in this life and your race, your creed, your color, your sexuality, your gender, whatever. Mental health doesn't give a shit.
Mm,
If it's gonna affect you, it's gonna affect you, and that can be through a multitude of life things that people just don't see beyond the artist that they're listening to in terms of the guy on the record cover, so to speak. And I thought it was really honest and open for Toby to talk about all these things because obviously mental health is always a very personal journey, and it's come out in this great EP. This great first offering from this collection of songs. It only came out a couple of weeks ago,
mm,
and so it's still very new. Um, and it's had so much of an impact on me. I had to make the list.
mm,
I think it's an important release for many factors. On top of that, it's just got great songs on it. I mean, Toby
mm,
Jepson is a fantastic songwriter. Um, and under Toby and the Whole Truth banner, he's gone in a few different directions that he probably wouldn't have been able to go in with Wayward Sons because you got four guys in a room like all putting their bits into the pot. Whereas you do a solo record, you can go where you like. And as much as he wrote with Dave, but he always writes with Dave, and I think that's important to notice. Don't underestimate Dave Kemp's influence on this album. I think, although it's Toby's story that
mm,
influenced mental health wise. Um, yeah, I just think it's really important. Listen, there's a lot of good messages in it. There's a lot of variety in it. There's some beautiful string arrangements in certain pieces, and I just think it's even. I just think anyone, even if you're not a fan of Wayward Sons or you're not a fan of Little Angels or Gunn or his solo work, just check this out from a humanity point of view, right? Give it a listen, and you might find something that you need to hear.
I mean, I love stuff like that where it's a real album and
Mm.
it's got real heart. Um, to again, we speak about this, for a bloke in particular, because we know that there is a problem out there. For a guy to come out with something like that and go, you know what, this is the thing, these are the problems that I've been having, or this is how I felt. To do that takes guts, So I have my utmost respect for him for that. The 2 ton shoes, of course, another one that you put forward there.
Yeah, I mean, with the Teton Shoes guys, it's this EP. I mean, I first heard them through my mate Alec, aka people might know him as Crazy Cowboy. Um, he put them on a show of theirs, and he's like, "Oh, Glee, you'll love this. This is
Mm,
up your street." And it absolutely was their IEP. Um, and if you love Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Mudhoney and Stone Temple Pilots and Queens of the Stone Age, go listen to this EP.
mm,
It is an EP in all the sense where I think it's only 3 songs on the on the EP itself, so it is short by its very nature, but it's just one of those things. It just makes me smile just thinking about it. Um,
mm.
with tracks like The Lie itself, particular. I mean, as soon as I heard that riff, I'm like, this has got Stone Temple Pilots written all over it, and Jane's Addiction, and Alice in Chains, and all those kind of sort of grunge alt rock bands, the sort of late '80s and into the '90s, of course, where the heyday was. And yeah, it was an EP. You got 3 songs. You stereotypically by the 10th listen round, you should be. I can't tear my hair out anymore, but you should be at least still getting a bit bored of it by that point. But I generally had it just those 3 songs spinning around the car for like about a week, just everywhere. It was just I couldn't get enough, and I couldn't soak up enough of it. Um, they worked with Wayne Proctor, who Ramblin' Preachers worked with on their
What's that
debut.
connection there? Yeah.
He's an incredible producer, obviously, as well as playing
Mm,
drums with Ollie Brown and the Dead Collective. An incredible producer and musician. And I think Wayne's got a magic touch of his own, given the Ramblin' Preachers album and other recordings he's been involved with. And I think it's
yeah.
again here with this EP, and it just shows so much potential from those guys. And I love it. They're having fun. They're doing what they do, and they're not trying to be anything else but them. And it's such a powerful EP as well. I mean, there's light and shade across 3 songs, believe it or not. There is a couple of more, one's very much more punchy grunge, and then you've got kind of more epic beast in the final track. But yeah, I couldn't not mention this EP because I've just been spinning it so much this year. So yeah, I had to.
But I mean, this is it. In some cases, this is what you want, right? I mean, is this I'm not overly familiar with their catalog. Is this their first release for them?
First release, yeah, they had like a single got released first off, which was a standalone single that got released last year, but this is their first.
So to come out, to come out the blocks, and to just hit you with these songs straight away. I think that's again, it's worth mentioning for sure. Finally, we've got Silver Roller, of course, played Just Push Play, but interestingly, of course, there is the story there because the EP does have different members, but it was incredibly well received. I mean, I remember hearing this when it first came out, and I thought, again, I thought these guys have got something going here. There's something happening with these guys. And then of course, they've had this kind of turmoil surrounding the EP for whatever reason. That's entirely their business. But I think you can easily get distracted. You can lose. Yeah, you can get distracted by all of that. But if you're looking at the album, well, the EP itself, it shows huge promise. Again, there's something there, isn't there?
Well, again, it's only this is only same with Toby Jepson's EP. This is only 6 tracks, but so much texture from Hold and Black Crow and Ways of Saying, Old Other Side, Come On, Come In. It's a great release. It's absolutely outstanding, frankly. And fair play to Johnny and Joe, because when the rest of the guys left in the band, it would have been very easy. And I don't know what happened in there. It's not my business.
No,
I don't need to know. But when Johnny rang me and said, I get a text from Johnny, and it's sort of probably about 6-8 weeks before Just Push Play, and I get a message from Johnny saying, "Lee, can I ring you?" And I'm like, "Oh, right, okay. What's going on?"
Yeah, you're like, "Oh God,
what's happening?" And I got on the phone, and he tells me, that it's just me and Joe left at the minute. Everyone else has left. And in that scenario, stereotypically, I guess some people would have thought I would have said, "All right, then, well, work it out. I'll see you next year." But he already said he'd got the other guys involved, and they were having a jam with Dylan, bass player, and everyone else. Trying to make it work, and he'd already worked with a guitarist before, so he knew he had that chemistry. I said, "Look, go have your jam, see how you find it. If you go have your jam and it's those elements aren't going to work right now, then don't worry about it, and we'll sort it out." There's honestly I've been doing the festival for 10 years. They're not the first people to call me up and say, "We've got an issue." It happens. It's life. But he called me up all pumped up a few days later, saying, we had such a great first rehearsal, and it's still raw. I mean, you didn't try and bullshit anything. It's raw. It's our first session, but there's something here. And Just Push Play was their first gig with this new lineup.
Yeah.
They've now had keys into the mix. They didn't have a keys player. Just Push Play, and just to see them come, honestly, it was one of the highlights. It's like that was the thing. Like, not only did they pull it off in terms of they got another guitarist and another bass player in, locked in, got a set, did the show, but there was a lot of people there that they were a highlight. Like, they were a highlight of the day. And I say that not disparagingly to previous members or anything like that, because I've seen them live before that split, and were brilliant. And then Aaron Keylock's a great guitarist and a phenomenal player, and it certainly wasn't going to be easy shoes for anyone to fill in. But things happen for a reason. Whatever's happened. And like I said, I don't know, and it's not my business. But to release this EP, which was Storming, and when Johnny said, these other guys are gone, I was like, oh, such a shame because the music's really good.
That was my first thought.
Really,
when
really
I
good.
saw that, I thought, oh God, because you see the EP, well, you hear the EP. I mean, I remember hearing the first single, and I thought, this is class. These guys are going somewhere. I read the Classic Rock review. They said exactly the same.
Yeah.
So then to see essentially nearly all of the band leave, you think, oh my God. But then to pull it back, like virtually straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable, is credit where credit's due, no matter what's happened, to be able to quickly assemble essentially a new band. Is something. But I mean, looking at this EP, I think that this shows real promise for the future, even though we have new members now. It shows that promise, because they obviously still have that sound now. And I think that, for me, that's something that I love to see with an EP. I like to see that, like, this is a taste of what we've got to come.
Yeah.
Because me personally, I'm a full album kind of guy. I like that kind of stuff, but I like to get these tasters for the future. And I think they certainly did that. And as you say, they've got 6 songs, but it felt so well rounded.
Yeah,
it felt like a mini album almost.
It did. And the songs are so big, and that it, I mean, we spoke last year about the sort of, the Rival Sons albums, and one of those was 6 tracks. Lightbringer was 6 tracks.
Yeah.
And I think this easily, if you really pushed it, maybe it would be considered a mini album rather than an EP. But it's so good. I don't care what category it's in. It was going to get my vote. It's just all across those songs. I've got the vinyl copy here, and as you know, I just keep looking at it down there, and it's just an incredible release, and everything about it feels class. I mean, like, that artwork is stunning.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. And they say, I mean, all the way through it, three tracks aside, and there's so much texture in it, from like big old ballads and things to like real on just full out bluesy rockers all the way through. It's great. It's just a great release, and I'm glad that in whatever format the band now is, I'm glad that they're still playing these songs.
Yeah.
It's incredible. What the guys wrote together, and with the new incantation, what they're now performing together. It's just killer, man. That's all I can say. It's just one of those things where, like,
it's just awesome, isn't it? Like, you go, oh, that's cool.
Like, if I was going to pick, a band for next year for all festivals to go, right, outdoor festivals in the sun, one band, Silver Roll. That's all you need. They've got that thing. They can pull it off stage wise, craft wise, song wise, and it's all got that promise on this At Dawn EP.
Of course, we're at that point again where we have to make a decision. For me, I'm kind of torn between Toby and Silver Roller. No discredit to Two Tone Shoes, because I think for them moving forward, I think they're going to have more to offer. But of course, if you're perhaps looking at just content, those guys have 3 songs. These two have more than that. I'm edging towards these two. I mean, it's difficult because they're so different to each other. They both offer different things. For me personally, I felt like I slightly am edging towards Silver Roller, because I think also, Toby's got his other things that he does as well that he smashes. He's killing it on other categories. And I think that, of course, this is a part 1, so it's kind of a half of a story, perhaps. Yeah. Whereas Silver Roller, they have the complete thing. Like, this is what it is. Maybe, I mean, you have to split hairs when you're making these choices. Maybe that's where I'm coming out. What are you feeling?
I mean, anyone who knows me knows I've got a big passion towards mental health through my own
Mm,
battles, and I've had two friends die by suicide, and
yeah.
anything along the delivering those positive mental health messages and smashing down taboos is always going to have my heart.
Mm,
That's a given. And it is a storming EP, and it's not just about the subject. It is, the craftsmanship of the songs,
mm.
the delivery, everything. It is a very, very good EP. But there's something that keeps nudging me back towards Silver Roller.
That's what I'm saying. There's a feeling, isn't there?
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe,
and
like you say, because there's more of the story to tell from Toby.
yeah.
There is other parts to come
Mm.
out from this release. I think he said he recorded something like 30 songs.
This is what I'm saying, because like that's of course like we've seen it's like a trilogy, isn't it? Like in a
Yeah,
movie trilogy, if you compare it to films, if you're sat down with Lord of the Rings, there's three parts that are all their own thing, but it's all part of this overarching story.
yeah,
And I feel like we've heard just a piece of that story currently.
I'll go with that.
Whereas Silver Roller, they've just come out and smashed
Yeah.
and just gone, here you go.
Mhm.
Here's a killer release.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel that they've stolen it slightly there. I think they've edged it.
Yeah, I think I'd
Do
agree
you
with you on
think?
that.
Right. So we have our second one decided. The best EP of 2024 goes to Silver Roller with Dawn. Yes, a bit of an upset there, I think already. Toppling a known person there. Moving on, of course, we're doing the best live act of
Yeah.
2024. Of course, live music. That's where the lifeblood of it all is. That's where the that's what keeps you going, right? You want to go to these things and see what they're doing. Um, of course, first up, we've got Philip Sace. Then we've got Florence Black. Finally, we have Carnival. Carnival, of course, a suggestion that you've thrown out there. I would assume you've seen them live, considering this.
It's my gig of the year, mate.
Wow.
They're my absolute gig of the year. I first saw these guys a long time ago, 2007, 2008, supporting Skin Dread at the UEA. No, it was at the Waterfront, to tell a lie. But real small gig. Early days at Skin Dread, they were supporting them. They came out and fucking knocked it out of the park. We all know how great Skin Dread are live, and for an unknown band to come along, or unknown to me, and I would think it's fair to say most of the Waterfront were unknown to them at that point. And to knock it out of the park how they did was incredible. And that got me hooked from the days on, like that day on. Fast forward to where we are now and seeing them up and down the country at Download Festival, all those kind of things. And then this year they were playing Download. They didn't go to Download Festival this year, but they were also doing two really small, intimate venues for them. They did Milton Keynes at the Crawford Arms, which was ridiculous. It sold out like literally within like 10 minutes. It had gone, it had gone so much. I didn't think I was going to get to go. I really didn't. And I was like, oh, shit, they're finally over here. They're an Australian band. They hadn't been over here since before COVID, so I hadn't seen them for quite a few years. And when they were coming over to the country, I was like, I really want to go see them. And because I hadn't been in a few years, didn't think I was going to get to go. Fortunately, I got offered some press tickets. Literally like 2 days before the show, I got an email saying, "Oh, would you like?" Because they emailed me like, "Could you do some promo for this?" And I was like, the PR person, was like, "Absolutely, we'll talk about it on the show. We'll play some Carnival. If there's any chance to interview the guys at all, let me know." And I didn't hear anything from them, and I didn't think too much of it. Obviously, coming from Australia over to UK, they were going through mainland Europe and everywhere else along the route, so to speak. And then about 2 days before I got an email saying, "Would you like to come along to the gig and interview Carnival in person?" Which is my first ever in-person interview that I'd done for the radio show, which was really, really cool. We get there and it's like, oh, we were going to do it in the venue, but that many people had turned up at the venue early.
Wow.
That it was just like rammed, and they just to get people off the street, because essentially, I don't know if anyone's watching or yourselves haven't been or seen the Crawford Arms. It's essentially a pub. They've got a really cool venue out, sort of more band venue part of it outside, out back of the pub. And you kind of walk through to the pub to get into it. But essentially, the bar area itself is the pub. And that many people had turned up already that they just had to let them in because people were just sort of basically, there's a few hundred people just outside the pub. And then, so as soon as we stepped on, you could feel that electricity. Immediately, as soon as I got out of my car, and I'm like, oh, something's going on there. And then, we all kind of, I got to do the interview with Hoss and Ian Kenny of the band, which is brilliant. And then you go into the gig itself, and the whole thing was just a sweat pit. From like the moment it kicked off, it was just absolutely insane. Still that same energy. What I loved about it was you could see how much the band were vibing on it as well. They'd not been over to UK thing. They'd done Download the day before. The gig was on the Sunday. They'd done Download on the Saturday. Still vibing off of that, all of that energy. And I saw the footage from the Download thing, and they were on like second stage. So a much larger audience than is at the Crawford Arms. But honestly, it could have been the same. That the energy that they delivered, the songs that they've been crafting in the meantime, they played one or two new songs. Then they go to the songs everyone already obviously knows and loves. And it was just from the water, like Joe won't mind me saying this, but when it gets a bit hemmed in and a bit crushing thing, that's not her favorite place. And I don't think anyone really likes being crushed in a gig.
Yeah.
I'll say that, it does get, I think some of us will put up with it, but I don't think anyone actually likes it. But I was just like, it's my wife, so I want to check in and make sure she's all right and just having fun. And, they're one of her favorite bands. And I did that thing of looking at her to sort of kind of go, are you okay?
Share the look.
It didn't even register with it that I was even sort of like kind of going, are you okay? Yeah. All right. She was just like locked into it like everyone else was, and was having the time of her life. And it's genuinely like the gig of the year for me, for all the gigs I've been to, for, a tiny kind of club gig to do it, because they're over here for anyway. There was something special in that atmosphere that night. Some gigs you go to and you're buzzing, but you can see, I don't know, maybe someone else is off there is not quite off in the atmosphere and is off for them, or maybe someone's having a bad night or whatever. And those gigs where everybody is vibing, you can feel that energy, and you can always feel it, and you can definitely feel it. I mean, we were all buzzing for me and Joe were buzzing for like the rest of the week. It was just like constantly coming in from work and being like, oh, that was they played this, and yeah, it's the absolute gig of the year for me, and it's not probably only. I'm going to put my head on it. It's the best time I've ever seen them.
Wow!
And I've seen them 12 times. That was the best time I've ever seen them. It reiterated my love for their music completely. I think you can lose it a little bit if you've not seen someone live for a long time. You could kind of lose that connection. And I think doing it in a small setting like that, obviously, where you've got the intimacy factor of a smaller venue, definitely gave that one a shot in the arm again. And yeah, it's not only one of my gigs of the year, it's probably one of the best gigs I've ever been to for period, just for sheer atmosphere and everything else. So yeah, I had to give Carnival a shout out.
I mean, this is going to be a tough category. I can feel it already because I'm going to come in with one that's just, it was insane. Philip Sace. I mean, I don't often, throw this out there, but fuck me, Jesus Christ, like that. It was something special. I mean, we had the added benefit of Tory Redfern opened as well, which isn't to be sniffed at. He was actually another person that I had considered for this category, but I thought perhaps it might be taking the mick a bit to have two people from the same show in the best live act. But the minute Philip Sace came out, he plugged in his guitar and he just played like this ridiculous solo, and that was him just tuning up. Like the crowd was like, you could audibly hear people go oof. Like there was this kind of moment. I mean, I have a couple of clips which have gone up and been shown in, as I was announcing this, and he is unbelievable. Like you see him on the videos, he has these Instagram solo things and does his guitar bits, and you see the music videos and you think, what a musician. But he's on another level live. Like it was incredible. Like genuinely, it was. I mean, I've seen quite a few bands now. I would say he's in my top 3 live shows I've ever seen. Ever. And in terms of guitarists, I think the only person that's matched him is probably Richie Kotzen.
Wow.
Like he was something extraordinary. He has his own sound. He plays with such feeling. You can there's an energy, you feel it when he plays. You can feel that energy. He's so expressive. But you can see he's just having the time of his life at the same time, but there was everything. I mean, obviously my father was there as well, who's seen, probably every top band under the sun. And Dad said, even my own dad, he was like, you know what, that's probably one of the best guitarists I've seen. And like you kind of take note at that point, because he's seen, Led Zeppelin. He's seen all the big acts, and he was there. He was saying, he was up there with like Jimmy Page and these iconic guitarists, and it felt that way. I mean, it certainly felt like he was playing he was playing as if he was playing in a stadium. It was that kind of energy of like, even though it was a smaller venue. I mean, me personally, I like that it's in smaller venues, but it had this elite vibe about it. I had the same feeling when I went to go and see the Winery Dogs with Richie Kotzen last year. We had this similar conversation, and again, we had a very similar crowd response. I always kind of take note of the people around me, and there, pretty much after every song, there was like an uproar of applause. For his extended solo sections. I mean, some people go, "Oh Christ, it's getting a bit boring, isn't it?" But like there were, you could hear people like being like, "Wow."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't hear that often when people are like, "Oof." It was unbelievable. I mean, Yeah, I'd say, I've seen Zach Wilde, I've seen Richie Kotzen. I'd put him in the same category. There was something incredibly special about him, and I mean, of course, he's played with Jeff Healey, and he's certainly got chops from the experience he's had over the years. But I mean, yeah, you until you see him live, you don't realize just how good he is. Like, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he has great records, but my God, seeing him live is another experience entirely. If people out there are going, "Who is Philip Sayce?" or "I've never seen Philip Sayce before," my God, go and see him. Because it was possibly the best 25 quid I've ever spent. Yeah, unbelievable, and of course, credit to Troy as well, who came out with a two piece and absolutely smashed it. But yeah, I mean, unbelievable from Philip Sayce. Very rare. I'll kind of be open mailed for half of the gig. But of course, we do have one more person as well to somehow compete with these two Goliaths. We have Florence Black as well, who are incredible live. Again, they've had another busy year. I mean, that they're due to go and do. I just saw recently that they're due to play in December. Two shows where they play Weight of the World and Bed of Nails, which I think is a really cool thing to do. I love that.
Yeah,
like they're playing both records in their entirety across 2 nights, which I think that's just that's so cool. Yeah. Of course, they played with Massive Wagons recently in my area in Nottingham. Again, for me, they're one of those bands that anytime you go and see them, they are consistently great.
Yeah.
No matter what year it is. Of course, we're talking about this year, but they've been consistently fantastic. And I think that they're just going from strength to strength. They seem to pack out every venue that you go to. I mean, they sold out the Rescue Rooms in no time.
They did seem to sell out really quickly though.
Yeah, like really fast, and it was so packed. I mean, there was 2 guys that I was speaking with at the Philip Sayce show, and they were like, "Yeah, we couldn't even see them. Like it was that busy there, like we heard them, but we couldn't see them." So again, there's something happening with Florence Black for sure. But of course, we have to somehow make a decision with this category for best live act of this year. I mean, I would assume you're edging towards Carnival because, of course, you were saying that that's your one of the year. And for me, I mean, Philip Sayce was just unbelievable. He was something extraordinary, special, like so special. It was unbelievable. So I think that those are perhaps the 2 that are competing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the 2 here, isn't it? Like we both had a gig that's had a huge impact.
Oh my God! I mean, it's. I mean, how do you decide?
No.
It feels like there was some kind of similar atmosphere. I don't know what
like Drew, the guitarist of Carnival. You're talking about Phil and his guitar playing. I mean, Drew guitar, just a beautiful guitar. I mean, very different styles. Carnival are very much more progressive, more heavy. Drew has this really cool Eastern kind of Middle Eastern slant to some of his solos. With the way he plays and the style in which he plays. Actually, Phil does what he does, and he does it great. I'm actually about to see Phil for the first time next week. So in Colchester. So I've not seen
honestly he's insane.
So I'm looking forward to it because I've never seen Phil before. Like love his music, but for whatever reason I've never caught him live.
Brace yourself. That's and I don't throw this around lightly.
No. I remember like there's there's a video of Carnival when they do one of their songs called Themata, and it's a big song for him. And the whole crowd's bouncing. And just at the end of the gig, and I remember hearing the guy do it because he was quite near me, and someone's filmed it and put it up on YouTube. And then right then, like they probably hadn't played here for about 8 years, with COVID and other things, and just literally just as the sort of like it's starting to fade out, and you just get that little bit between songs, you just hear this guy go, "Fucking hell, I'm watching Carnival."
Yeah.
And it's not like someone like trying to like have a joke or whatever. It's just this genuine expression of, "Oh fuck me, I'm watching this."
And that was exactly the similar thing with there was a section where I've got it on the recorded, like it was just literally played, where he's like doing the harmonics on this solo, and he's just there, and you could hear a pin drop in the room. I mean, there was a section of the show where he turns the volume all the way down, so you can, it's just, like when you play an electric guitar, but it's just like twangy.
Yeah,
he did that in the show, and you could hear a pin drop, and it's there was something so special about that show. And like, I mean, if you're due to see it, I'm going to make a bold claim. I think if you see him, I think you may very well say that's the gig of the year,
Oh, that's a bold claim.
I know. I'm going to say it. And I don't throw that out very often. I would never kind of dispute you very often. But I think that there's something that is very rare about Philip Sayce, that you don't see very often anymore. In particular, like from the minute he came out, it was like the old school quintessential guitar hero. It was like that kind of energy, perhaps the same energy as a Hendrix or a Stevie Ray Vaughan, or these kind of Goliaths from back in the day. It had that aura. I mean, at one point he did play Manic Depression, of course, a Jimi Hendrix song, and it was fucking special, man. Like, but like the whole set, like I can't tell you at any point where I was like, you know what, get a shift on, like, where sometimes you go a little bit more low key. But I mean, he played a very interesting cross section. He played some kind of old school blues. He played a bit of like John Lee Hooker, but like with a modern Philip Sayce slant on it. And then he would go off and play his own stuff. And it just all blended perfectly well. And people leaving the room, there was just this feeling, and like, I think if he'd have come out again, people would have just like he could have kept playing all night. I think people would have just stayed there quite happily. There was something extraordinary. But I mean, of course, we have to somehow reach a conclusion. We're kind of deadlocked here between that. I mean, do we just kind of put it at a neck and neck, or do we like, how are we feeling? Are we going to do like the first ever draw? I don't think we've ever done a draw before.
I don't think we've ever done a draw, but I can't see it feels like both of us had a really spectacular gig and a really defining gig from both, Carnival and Philip Sayce respectively. I mean, I don't think either of us are going to budge.
It's the rare occasion where, like last year, I went to go and see the Winery Dogs, and I'm a big Kotzen fan.
Yeah.
And I thought that's probably going to be the best gig I'm going to see for a long time. Like in terms of ability in particular, like the level was so high, it was unbelievable. And then here we are, like a year later, and Philip Sayce just absolutely smashed all expectation. When you go into a gig and you think this is going to be good, but then he somehow surpasses that expectation. And as I say, for me personally, it was in like one of the top 3 shows I've ever seen. So it's really difficult when you're saying best live act of the year, because like for me, this is like one of the best live acts I've ever seen.
Well, this is it, like, I mean, this year I think it's fair to say,
Yeah.
like, Joe, as you know, loves the more progressive slant side of things. That's what Joe loves, and she, it's been fortunate for Joe. A lot of her favorite bands have come back round to the UK, for some of them first time for a while. And not long before we saw Carnival, we saw Tool at Manchester Arena. Now, if anyone's ever seen Tool will know they have a huge light show and everything's all very much encompassing. Whether you're at the back of the stadium or on the front row, you're going to be kind of enraptured, almost kind of cinematically, by the light show and everything as they put on. They were fucking incredible as always, like they're absolutely brilliant. And I went to Joe. No one is going to beat, for like the side of things you love, no one's going to beat that for me.
Yeah.
Cut to 2 months later, Carnival are essentially in three. I don't know what the capacity is of the Crawford Arms. I guess around 400, 500 maybe. It's not huge, but they're in a club, and yeah, there was lights, but it's not an all-encompassing modern day version of a Pink Floyd experience. It is club lights. And because of the atmosphere they implicated into everyone, and they were vibing, and the audience is vibing, you got that synergy just rolling. They're feeding off us, and we're feeding off them, and then it's just going round and round. I walked away more buzzing, going, Tool had the big stadium and everything that goes along with a Tool show.
Yeah.
I think Carnival would have edged this. I think just doing what they do, they might have beaten Tool. In terms of how they made me feel, there will be people who were at Tool who will go, "You don't know what you're fucking talking about, Lee."
But it's an emotional thing, a live show.
Yes,
and that's exactly what I was talking about. Like, for me, I look for, particularly nowadays. Now I've got older as well. I don't really care about the appearance or the light show or any of that. I mean, all of this is very nice. But I look at that person's musicianship. I look at the level that they're playing at. I look at the ability, the craft, the work that it takes. And, from the very first note he played, you could tell it was like, this guy has really, like, he's put in he's put way more in than 100 hours. Yeah. Are we going to say a draw? Because I can't discount your experience.
No, and I don't want to discount.
This is like one of the best ones I've ever had as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to discount yours, mate, because like you say, it's a very personal thing. It's an emotion. I think we're going to have to deadlock it.
It's the first. So for the first ever time on Beyond the Vibe Awards, because we literally can't choose between the two, because both of these shows, I think, are perhaps one of our best personal experiences, is certainly in there. So in this very unusual case, I mean, it may never happen again. But the best live act of 2024 is drawn between Carnival and Philip Sace. Unbelievable. If you want to comment in the comments below, if you've seen either of these, please do comment. Maybe the audience can decide for us. Maybe put your votes in the comment below. Moving on, as I'm sure we'll be here all night if not. It's best international band. Of course, for those bands that are overseas, that perhaps come over here or done something amazing, like release an album or such. First up, we have the Dead Daisies. Next, we've got Robert John and the Wreck. And then finally, we have the Commoners. I mean, all three of these bands, very strong bands. I mean, me personally, I went to go and see the Dead Daisies a while ago. And of course, they've got John Corabi back.
I love John Corabi.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are people out there that say, oh, they've taken, because I've seen a couple of these reviews where they say, oh, they've taken a step back now that Glenn Hughes has left the band. Whereas, for me personally, I love Glenn Hughes. I mean, Glenn Hughes, it's undisputed that he's a great musician, right? He's an elite musician. But the main problem I had when Glenn Hughes was in the Dead Daisies was that it felt like a Glenn Hughes album. It felt like a Glenn Hughes project.
Yeah, I felt the same. I felt like John Corabi for me,
Mm.
I'm a bass player. You cannot be a good bass player
Yeah.
and not love Glenn Hughes. The man's voice as well, it's just on another level.
Mm.
He's still hanging out those notes that
Yeah.
most singers can't do in their 20s, and he's doing them in his 70s.
Yeah.
He's an incredible singer, an incredible bass player. So it's not disrespect to Glenn
No.
on any level. The man's an absolute genius.
Mm.
But I felt like when they had John Corabi at the front, that was the voice of the Dead Daisies. He
It's
was the
more of an
man.
ensemble, I think, when
Yeah,
Corabi's there.
I felt that. And now that he's back, and the
Mm.
two, Radiance and everything else that they did with Glenn was fantastic.
Mm.
Felt like a Glenn Hughes solo album. It felt like it morphed slightly, something
Yeah.
shifted. And great records, absolutely
Mm.
great records, but something shifted. And I feel now that John Corabi's back at the front, it's shifted back.
Yes, it felt to me it was like I saw them live in September, and it felt to me like it was like this is the Dead Daisies, like this is who the band that I kind of like fell in love with a bit years ago when they first came out with those first records, and playing Long Way to Go and all these classic stuff. I mean, they have killer riffs. The new record, I think, again, for me personally, is a return to that kind of original era, which, as I say, for me personally, even though I love the Glenn Hughes stuff, it felt like this is a return to the Dead Daisies. And I think Karabi, you can't help but love him. Like if you've seen him live, he's got this charisma about him, and he's almost like a stand-up comedian at points. He's hilarious. He's just got something about him. Again, it's that kind of X factor. He's a guy I'd love to speak with at some point because I just think he would be like he's a born entertainer, isn't he?
He is. I was fortunate enough to have him on the radio show last time, the last record they did with the Dead Daisies, and I felt like no matter what happened, like that was one of the coolest interviews I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like for me, and I'll say this now, and I'll always say it, and I'm sure there'll be lots of comments now going, "Boo, Lee, you don't know what you're fucking talking about." But I will maintain, for me personally, and this is just my opinion, the self-titled album he did with Motley Crue is the best album that Motley Crue ever did. It's the best record they ever did for me. It sounded so much more genuine and it's so much more raw. I'm going to say this here and now, and he knocks the shit out of Vince Neil.
Controversial statements here. Well, you see, I think that there's a strange parallel here. When we were talking about the Glenn Hughes thing and the Corabi thing, there's a weird parallel because, if you're looking in pure ability, of course, Glenn Hughes is elite, right? And he's got his own thing. And, you're looking at Corabi in Motley Crue, and, perhaps you could make an argument that he's a better singer.
Yeah.
But the issue is, for me, it's identity, isn't it?
Yeah,
we're both looking at identity.
The voice thereof.
Vince Neil is the voice of Motley Crue. Whether he's better or not, that doesn't matter. It's like that's the voice that people associate with that band.
Yeah.
And you see, I have that with the Dead Daisies. I associate Corabi with the Dead Daisies. You might think Glenn Hughes is a better singer or a better musician, but it's that identity, isn't it? It's that character.
It is, and I think with the albums he did prior to obviously, him going off and doing his own thing for a little bit, and then doing those two albums, including Radiance, with Glenn, like it felt like brilliant. John Corabi's back. He's gone and done his solo stuff, of course, in the interim between that, but it felt like brilliant. John Corabi's finally getting a bit of kudos and a bit of, coming over to the. Maybe it's just. He did a lot of stuff in the States solo. He did one or two things over here. I went to go see him do an acoustic tour over here. Like, God, I was at uni, and so it's like quite a few years before the Dead Daisies came along. And it was brilliant. But I just felt like him fronting a band is just there's something he needs a a kick-ass rock and roll band, right? To kind of front and to not to carry him, but to have that as a backing and as a launch pad, if you like. And just to have him back, I was pretty excited when they said, look, Glenn's going off to do solo stuff, and we're bringing John Corabi back. It was like, that's just the news I wanted to hear, to be honest. Of course, the album they've done this year with him is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Sally Ham didn't see him on this last tour, unfortunately, family stuff. But, you know, I'm looking forward to getting to see them again.
Yeah. Again, you know, for me, I think that this is the return of the Dead Daisies I know. Robert John and the Wreck. I mean, this is a band that are going from strength to strength. I see that Joe Bonamassa is now looking around them. You know, he's got them there. It's, you know, he knows there's something there. I mean, when a musician of his caliber takes note of a band, you're like, okay, something serious now. And of course, you know, they've released the album Red Moon Rising, which again has done very well. I think they've just had a massive year, haven't they? You know?
Yeah. And I think they're a band that, say, maybe in the last sort of 3 to 4 years, have really started to make their impact. You know, they've been going a lot longer than that, I know, but and I've certainly been listening to them a lot longer than that. But it feels like this last three to four albums, you know, I mean, when I saw it Ramblin', I didn't want to go say Ramblin' Man Fairly. It's not Ramblin' Man Fairly. Sorry, Chris, because I know Chris who runs Maidstone. Maidstone Festival 2 years ago when they had headlined the second stage. The then forthcoming release, which title escapes me off the top of my head, hadn't quite come out. It was like a week or two before it came out. But you could buy it at the merch store. And they were rightly doing the right thing. They played the stuff everyone knows, of course, but they did play maybe 3 numbers off the new album. Like the stage is there and the merch stall's here, and you can just see everybody going, okay, and then you just saw the line going, and I did exactly the same. I watched it. They played 3 songs
just
from it,
funneled in,
and I was like, the album's over there. Like, I'm going over there and buying it now, and listen to it all the way back, and it's just an incredible release. And they just got this magic about their songwriting. Yeah, like no matter what, even before I've listened to it, and maybe I should admit that, but when I get a press release coming from Robert John for radio show, even before I've listened to it, I'm going, well, that's getting played on Friday.
It's just so consistent.
It's they don't dip. You don't have to listen to. Of course, you listen to it and you go, they've done it again. This is amazing. But there's a trust there that no matter what they put out, it's going to be worthy, and it's not even going to be worthy in like it's cool. These guys have just released new music. It's going to be worthy on a song level. Some songs you get sent and you go, well, that's cool. They released something new. I'll play that, and then you maybe don't get around to playing that particular track again for whatever reason, just because a lot of new stuff comes in. With Robert John and the Wreck, I'm kind of going, well, which song do I play? Because the whole album's being released now. And I think I played that one 2 weeks ago, but I might have played that last week. And, it's just consistency in their songwriting is outstanding. And for a band that, I mean, they've had quite a few albums in the last 5 years. It was like 4 albums in 5 years or something.
Yeah, it's a very busy period. Yeah,
very, really busy period for them. And I just feel that, like, when you're that consistent, there's normally, in terms of output, there's normally a dip in quality. There might be songs that don't quite match up to certain others, but with them, it just seems to be constantly at the top of their game.
I agree. I mean, when I was speaking with Robert John earlier this year, he was, you could feel that he was like, this is being class. Like he was kind of on cloud 9. He spoke about getting to go and play Can't You See with the Marshall Tucker Band. I mean, that's a huge leap forward. I mean, that's one of his personal favorite bands, and it's like, what a moment for him personally to have that. I mean, and for me, I'm looking at how fast they've risen. I first saw them a few years ago, and they were playing. See, I always categorize it in terms of venues on how well a band are doing. But they were playing the Bodega in Nottingham. It's like for those that don't know, that's kind of like with no discredit, but it's like a glorified bar. It's a very small venue. They were playing there first, and when now a couple of years later, literally like 2 years, 2 and a bit years, and he's playing with the Marshall. He's coming out as a guest the Marshall Tucker Band. I mean, that's insane. Unbelievable. But of course, we still have one more left. The Commoners. Again, they're having another. They've got another album out. Another good year for them. I think it's another solid. I mean, for me personally, I think that they've had a big step up from their previous release. I felt that this is like a 2.0 version of them. I think that they've just really refined who they are and what they're doing. Like, I think they really know their sound and what they're going for moving forward. I don't know about you, when you first heard that record.
I mean, when I heard the first album, I thought this is really great. This shows a lot of promise and a lot of cool stuff. And then like this record, like I say, it's more refined. Like you say, it's seems to bore down that essence of who they truly are. They've got a real identity about it. It packs a bigger punch because of that. They seem to have stepped everything up a notch in terms of songwriting, in terms of the craft of it, what they're doing, as both as individually and as a unit themselves. There's just a real fire about that album. And I'm glad they keep coming back to the UK, because I think like Robert John record, I just watch them again and again and again. For me, that's why I wanted them, because it felt like a real big step up, and it feels like they're starting to get some real traction in the UK with festival slotting and billing, and you can already see them starting to, rise up those ranks of the festival billings and stuff. So I think it's been a really good year for them.
Of course, we have to make that decision. I mean, for me personally, I'm edging, no discredit to the Commoners, but I think they've got much more to give moving forward. I think that, if you compare these three bands, of course, they all have their own identity here, but I think that you've got two other bands that are very experienced and that are, you've got a veteran band, a super group band, and you've got a band that's, Joe Bonamassa wants to be associated with. I mean, that unbelievable competition. I mean, I think for the Commoners to even be nominated at this stage, only their second album, I think that's an incredible step forward for them. Who are you feeling between these guys? I mean, Robert John and the Wreck, I mean, I think they were amazing. I mean, a couple of years ago, they did win. I mean, Red Moon Rising, I think, is, for me personally, when I'm looking at their releases, I think I don't know where it is currently in my personal ranking yet, but I think that it's certainly competing with Last Light on the Highway, which was, to this point, my first. To this point, it was the one that introduced me to the band, and it's the one that I've always thought is their best work, and it's competing with that. Maybe in a few months I may put it above that. I don't know. Who are you feeling? I'm gonna give this one. Who are you feeling? Because I can't really. I'm neck and neck with both of these.
It's really, really tough. I love them both, like you, for very different things, and get different things out of them. I think on balance, and it really is pointing a gun at my fucking head.
Yeah, it's really tough, isn't it?
It's really tough. I think I'm edging towards Robert John on the Wreck, because I think there's a magic about those guys. I think that their daisies have just started to get it back now that they've got that more, what I would say was the sound of their lineup, in terms of having John Corabi back in not having a singing bass player, but having, a solid bass player back in the lineup. And I think the last album has proved that it's still, that magic is still there.
Yeah.
But I think because they're still if you're being critical, maybe finding their feet again a little bit with each other
Yeah.
and with the public, because it's a changing lineup again.
Yeah.
And I know because of the way they are as a band, and they've always had this revolving door
Yeah.
kind of situation with band members. A lot of people can find that
Difficult to connect with,
difficult to
isn't it?
kind of connect with, and I think people connect easier to Robert John and Wreck. No disrespect to Dead Days, because as I say, I do absolutely love them. And I think they're a fun party band. You know,
Yes.
they are a band that you want in a live setting, a few beers into, some kick-ass rock and roll, and just enjoy it. But I think on balance, in terms of songwriting, in terms of the consistency on the output, in terms of what they're actually doing, and how I've seen people being made to feel at gigs, both in terms of immediately rushing off to buy the album before it's released, realizes at the merch, and also in terms of like a sheer kind of emotion in the venues of certain songs. I think I've got to go for Robert John and the Wreck on this.
Yes, so I'm going to go with that, because I mean, for me, I was neck and neck. I'm hearing that argument, and I'm edging towards that as well. So I think for the first time ever, we've had a band that's come back and won the same category again a couple of years later. Of course, as I mentioned there, I think that I do strongly believe that they won the first year that we did this. So here they are again. The best international band of 2024 is Robert John and the Wreck. The first ever time that that's happened. So that's a new thing there. Best UK band. Of course, we've had the international guys come in, the ones from overseas, but who are the ones at home that are smashing it? First up, we've got Blue Nation. Next, we have Those Damn Crows. And finally, we have the Virgin Marys. I mean, this is a very strong category. And interestingly, we've got no kind of legacy bands here in the UK section. These are all new. Yeah, these are all new bands. I mean, maybe you could say Dead Daisies are a new band, but they consist of very experienced members who have, all absolutely smashed it in their careers. But, with this section, I don't know if this is the first time we've had this, where we've got three bands who are all, I mean, of these three, the Virgin Marys are the most experienced.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have been here the longest. And, you could certainly argue that they're still kind of relatively new, particularly with this kind of new refresh that they've had. I mean, let's stick with the Virgin Marys. What were we feeling with that? I mean, they've had another album come out. It's done very well. They're getting airtime on Kerrang. It seems like they're getting a second wave happen.
They seem to be. I mean, it seems to be the album's only been out a few weeks now, but it seems to be, the biggest release in a long time.
Yeah.
It's an incredible album. Has been on the fires. I can't stop listening to it. The tour, both in the UK and the mainland Europe shows that they're currently on board with, seems to be going insane. I know it's a lot of fans from the UK, and certainly a few I know personally went over to Prague to go watch them just because they wanted to see them again on this tour. And the tour, I saw it in Norwich the other week, and it was phenomenal. The songs are kicking the hell out of everything live. I think it's arguably their best release since King of Conflict. Who knows with time? I mean, King of Conflict was 2010, I think.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Somewhere around there, anyway. When with the passing of time, you always put, emotions and experiences onto songs, and that obviously changes how the perception you have of them when you hear them. And maybe once you've had the passing of time a little bit with this album, and people can put similar experiences and similar memories onto these songs, maybe it will even surpass it. I think the guys really are on fire right now. I feel like they've been bubbling under the surface so much because they have continued to release EPs and everything, but it feels like everything's kind of kicked up again with this new album. It feels like it's the right time for them to really have another light shined upon them. I think since they became a duo, and now Sally and Danny in the band, I think they've definitely proved it in a live setting, without doubt, over the years that it works, and the songwriting certainly. But they've done it as like I say, EPs and singles, and now they've released this whole entire body of work. I think people are kind of ready for it, and I think it's very emotional playing on this album, both from Danny and Ali, and then the vocals as well from Ali. There was definite magic when I saw them in Norwich the other night. You know, they've come out with I wouldn't say a point to prove, but there was definitely an energy. They went out for the kill. You know, they weren't going to. The album was never going to have a quiet release, and nor should it. And I think people are ready for them to maybe take a crown each for maybe what they should have had all along.
I mean, it's so rare that a band can reach real heights, no discredit, but drop and go through difficulties, but then come back and start to hit those heights again like a second wind. It's very rare that you see that happen. Usually when a band kind of drops or difficulties happen for whatever reason, they struggle to get back, or they have to change their name, or they have to have this refresh of some description. Whereas these guys, I think that they've stuck to their guns. And I think that there's this real confidence from them of, you know what we're doing is working. We've got to go through this. We've got to ride the wave, and we'll get to where we want to be. And you know, you can feel it, can't you, when they play, and you know, they play with such passion. I mean, lyrically, I think Ali is incredibly underrated. You know, I think he's certainly up there. You know, he's just such a great lyricist. Of course, we've got those damn crows, who, you know, I wanted to include because they've been on a consistent rise for what now? 5 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
And you know, I spoke to them in series 1, the first season. And they spoke about this ambition of, we want to play kind of arenas. We want to play big venues. And I remember saying at the time, I was like, wow, that's a bold claim. You know, of being like, oof, you know, like you're saying your height's really high here. And you know what? They're starting to do that now, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, supporting some huge bands as well along the way. I mean, didn't I see recently they were one of the opening bands with ZZ Top?
Yeah, it was ZZ Top, Rival Sons, and Crows.
Yeah. I mean, look at that for a line out. I mean, to be on that bill.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, that just shows the rise that they've been on. I mean, of course, they're the opening act, but my God, you know, you know, I mean, ZZ Top are, of course, iconic, and Rival Sons are one of the kind of the next big bands of this kind of new era. To be on that billing, I think, shows a sign of confidence from whoever's making these decisions, booking them. You know, they obviously feel that they're moving in the right direction. Of course, the last one, a band that won the best EP last year, so they've taken a huge step up. Blue Nation, a band that we're both very familiar with. Again, what a busy year they've had, isn't it?
They've had a hell of a year, not only with the release of The Ordinary People. The album has come out. They've been touring like loads. They're currently on this big tour with Don Martin.
Yeah.
Currently in Ireland at the moment. Alongside of that, they've had all these great shows. They've got some great festivals already getting lined up for the summer for them, with things like Made of Stone Festival. They've been booked for that, and Firebolt, and you know, there's this bits and pieces that are getting announced all the time. It seems like every time I go online, there's more dates getting announced to their billing for, you know, for the year, and now obviously into 2025. And it just feels like every gig that I go to these days, and every show that I go to, there's more and more Blue Nation t-shirts about every festival I go
Yeah.
to, and they just seem to have had a really good year in terms of growth. They were invited to be part of this documentary for around sort of the Birmingham music scene.
Yeah.
And they were interviewed for that. And, they get interviewed along the lines of alongside the lines of fucking Tony Iommi and stuff, which is just insane. I know the boys couldn't believe it when they were doing it. Like, what are we doing? Sitting alongside getting interviewed by likes of people who are also interviewing Tony Iommi for his involvement and all these other great, sort of Birmingham-based artists and stuff. And it's insane, man. They've got a great team around them. They seem to just been doing things for them all the time. Like I say, every time I go on, there's a new tour, there's a new bit of it. And they've formed a really good bond with their fans as well.
I was going to say, they
a
know
real good community about it.
They know how to build what I would call a very genuine community, because they're genuine people. They don't put on this rock star front or persona of I'm really cool, the classic kind of thing. Probably what people would imagine in their head of a rock star. Imagine that. They don't put that on. They're just who they are. And when I was speaking with Neil earlier in the year, we talked about that photograph where Luke looks like some kind of children's TV presenter, and he had the friendliest look I've ever seen in a poster. And I said to him, I says, most bands would have hidden that.
Yeah.
But you guys, you post it. You're like, yes, done. Album poster, tour poster. And, I think that kind of embracing that kind of this is who we are. You can't help but like them and want them to do well. I think their fan base they're so behind them because they're so real.
This is they're real, they're honest, they're heart on the sleeves, no, like I say, no bravado, no bullshit, no frontery. It's they are. I mean, fucking honestly, the screams I've had over the last couple of years of having those guys at Just Push Play, and even to the other side of that coin, people will know if they've ever been backstage at Just Push Play. I run around like a fucking loon, like any person who's ever put on a fucking gig. I'm not different to anyone else. But Just Push Play, that's my baby, as with, Heretic Fest, it's Hannah's baby, and, Ozfest is Jodie's, and Stone Dead is Chris and the whole team's babies and everything else. And you will run around your ass off. And I can't speak for anyone else, but I shit myself for the first three bands, right? I'm stood there in the Apex going, right, who's going to actually, I know it's sold out again. I know how many tickets we sold, but is anyone actually going to fucking come? Are they actually going to come through the door? And I was running around like a loon, and I turned around. I was sort of walking backstage. You've been backstage at Apex because you came obviously having tides the other year. And I was coming through where the loading bay is, and unbeknownst to me, Blue Nation boys have arrived. Joe or whoever's seen them in. And I sort of walked into Luke, and Luke's just there with this lovely sort of childlike grin on his face that he's got, and he's just like, "Oh, all right, eh?" And I'm like, "Oh, all right." Look. And he's just going, and there's Neil going, just comes and gives me a hug, and he's just like, "Will you calm down, mate? It's fine. Look, there's people there. You're fine. Look at it. It's great." And I'm like, "No, I'll see you later." And then even their manager, Ron, he's brilliant bloke. Every time I went, he's like, "Have you calmed down yet, Lee?" And I'm, "No, not yet. Just a minute." They're just those kind of guys. They're honest, they're real, they get it. They're the most easy people to deal with ever. And the down to earth, like you say, there's no bullshit, there's no bravado, there's no this, oh, we're trying to be cool. I noticed earlier today they posted a photo, and it's like, oh yeah, we share sleeping duties and work duties. They've taken a photo of poor Luke while he's all cozied up in bed, and Neil's on the laptop doing something.
But you can't help but love them for it, right? It's just that realness. I think they kind of let you in on that. I can't
tell you how many times it Just Push Play where you get a bit of a rapport with someone. They go, "Oh, you should, should meet up and we'll have a drink and we'll meet away from the festival and we'll have something to eat and come up our way and we'll have a few beers or whatever. Anytime you want to get, and it's always nice. And don't get me wrong, everyone's always delivered.
Yeah.
People are honest in that factor, and most, a lot of the time. But it's normally like, a few months down the line when stuff started to settle a bit, or they're playing a gig somewhere and I go up for it, and it's like, okay, well, before the gig, we'll go out and we'll have a bite to eat or whatever. Literally 2 weeks after the first time they played Just Push Play last year, not this year, but last year, I got a text from Neil saying, "Oh, we've got a break in our tour, so are you and Joe doing anything on this night? And we'll come down for that meal." I'm
Wow.
like, I didn't expect you to do it this quick. And he's like, "Well, you doing anything?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well, cool, we'll do it then."
Wow.
And they were down, and we had a great night and just chilled out and bit dinner. But that's what I mean. They just there's no bravado about it. If they're the kind of guys, if they're gonna say they're gonna do something, then they're gonna do it. They're not gonna tell you they're gonna do it to fluff your ego up a bit, or just for something to say while they're playing your gig. They're just genuine guys, and they say that community around them is built really, really well. And I think that's because of the sheer honesty about it. You can tell when someone's saying the right things to appear good on media, and you can tell when people are genuinely who they say they are.
I mean, the thing that sticks in my head from speaking with Neil in particular earlier this year was we spoke about, would they be signed to a label, or would they want to do that, or would they stick with this kind of independent road that they're going down? And he very openly said, he goes, well, we're open to it, but we've been in the room before with, different labels. And he says every time, he says, you no discredit to them, but like, you can't be more invested in this band than we are.
Yeah.
There is no way that you could be. This is our thing, like this is our priority. You could never prioritize us in the way that we do, because obviously they've got other bands, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, they put everything into that, like everything they've got goes straight into that band. And, that level of commitment is massive. Of course, we have to somehow reach a decision for this. The best UK band, I think all three of these have very good reasons for winning.
Oh, absolutely.
Who are we kind of feeling? Who are we gravitating towards?
Tough again, man. Like, all three are really, really great. I mean, I think I've got obviously emotional connection to all three of them. Virgin Mary's, of course, headline Just Push Play. Blue Nation, I've played the last two. And those Damn Crows headline in 2021, which was a phenomenal year for us. And the guys have been brilliant and supporting ever since. They're top guys. But if we're focusing on this year, like, I think they've Crows, yes, they've done some great shows this year. They've certainly not been inactive. But I think next year might be a bigger year for them. They've just released their latest single, Glass Heart.
Talking about another album,
yeah, they got the new album, God Shaped Hole. I think that was April next year. That's coming out. I can see that being like a really big year for them, in terms of they've already built themselves up so much, and they are without doubt, alongside the lines of like Massive Wagons. That's that sort of real top tier, if you like, of bands that have come around in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And I think next year will be a really, really, really good year for them with the new album. I think that could, they're talking about that stadium thing they spoke about before. They've done obviously the Cardiff Stadium. They've got that show, I think next week. I think it's the 8th or 9th, with Sophie Lloyd and Himalayas. So I feel like next year might be a stronger year for them because they've got the album to come out, and that's
like they've teed themselves up for next year.
I feel so. I feel like this is like a prep year for next year.
They've
obviously done the shows and that, and their live stature and what they deliver live, I don't think is any question of being disputed. But when they've got something new to promote, I feel like they might be firing on a few more cylinders, because they've got that new material to kind of showcase, obviously. In terms of the other two, this is
I mean, both have had massive years.
they have.
Different styles of band completely, but
Very.
With the best UK band, we always try and look at a band that in this particular year, who's the band that's had the best year, the best UK band, the one that's, they might not necessarily be the biggest band, but if they've had like a very active year and a very busy year, and they've really come on leaps and bounds, I think that would certainly categorize them as as the best UK band for 2024 or whatever year it would be. It's really tough because I think that both of these have had huge years.
They have, without doubt. Both had huge years. I mean, Virgin Mary's went off touring around Europe with Sisters of Mercy and stuff like that, playing huge venues. They've obviously just released this incredible album. See, that's the thing. Virgin Mary's and Blue Nation was my number 1 and 2 in our top albums of the year countdown.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's a factor as well. I mean, they were in your list in particular. They were both right up there.
Absolutely.
As having top albums. Me personally, if I'm looking at progress in just 1 year, if I'm looking at kind of impact and I'm looking at growth, I'm feeling Blue Nation because I'm looking at, I mean, just now it springs to mind that they went on American news.
Yeah.
They were on Times Radio.
Yeah.
I mean, I said to Neil at the time, I says, what is going on? Like, I blink and then they're doing something else.
Yeah, it just seems like a constant years for those guys. It's been really, really good year for them. Like everything's coming out. Like I said, they've had the Times News thing. They've been involved
Don
in
Martin.
Don Martin, got the Birmingham documentary that's soon to come out. They're kind of showcasing themselves again at the end of the year at the Crossing on the 14th of December, which I cannot wait for. I'm going up to that, going to see them. And I know they've got things planned, things I've been trying to get out of Neil, but he's not having it yet. So.
Yeah.
He's just been going, we've had this really cool meeting. It's going to be great at the Crossing, man. You're going to have a good time. And I'm like, wicked, what are you doing? He's like, I can't tell you.
Can't tell you. Yeah.
Ron will kill me, And I mean, I don't, I think if you ask Luke, he probably would just tell you because that's Luke.
Yes, he's done that, hasn't he?
I've certainly done interviews with Luke, and then like an hour or so later, when he's obviously like gone and spoke to whoever, go and call up the guys and go, oh yeah, well I spoke to the Lee and blah blah blah, we've done this, and at the moment times I've had a message from him saying, mate, that's not coming out for another 6 weeks, so can you edit that out? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'm not there to, buster anyone's plans or anything. But that just goes back to what we're saying about how honest and open they're like, well, and like Luke said, it was like, well, that's what we're doing, so I told you. So, well, and that just shows not only like, that's not to discredit anyone, it shows how much they're not out to play a game. They're not out to be cloaks and daggers. Then they've got no harm in showing their cards in terms of this is what we've got planned. There's always a strategy of things. You've got to release things in the right way. But in terms of growth, I think Virgin Mary's had a really good, strong year with the album and everything.
Yeah.
But it's a little like, I feel like, again, similar to Crows, I think the next year for Virgin Mary's is going to be strong. I think they're going to build on this album.
It's like they've set a foundation.
A really solid foundation for next year, yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I feel that Blue Nation last year were preparing for this year. To go, right, now we're going to really grow, we're going to really hit the ground running, because it feels from kind of January onwards, like if we're looking at the year, they've just been doing things in every single month of that year. There's been something.
Yeah, it's been constant.
Have we reached the conclusion?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so as well. I mean, again, we've got another first here. Last year, of course, Blue Nation got, best EP. And what a jump for them to go from best EP to this year's best UK band of 2024. Of course, it is Blue Nation. What a jump. I mean, again, we're talking about progress in a year. I mean, that kind of sums it up, I think. Moving on, of course, we've got another tough category to somehow decide. It's best breakthrough artist. Of course, this one I always feel like I have to kind of define. People go, what do you mean by breakthrough? A breakthrough artist for me and for this one is they could have existed for 20 odd years, whoever it is. But they may have been playing, I don't know, pubs or clubs. People may not be familiar with them, and then they may take off. I mean, I think a prime example was last year's winner in Anthony Gomes. Of course, he's been around for a long time, but then he all of a sudden came out with this album and he just took himself to a whole new level. He really broke through. So it is that definition of really breaking through. The nominees for this category are Don Martin, Kira Mack, and Dan Byrne. Don Martin, of course, huge year for Don Martin.
Absolutely.
He's been busy once again. I mean, he had last year he released, of course, Buried in the Hail, which did very well. I think if it weren't for the simple fact that Rival Sons had a freak year where they had 2 albums, I think he may have swept the board in last year's award show. He came very close. But of course, this year, I saw he got the opportunity to have a go on Rory Gallagher's guitar at that auction. I mean, for him, I know that was a huge moment for him, of course, being a Rory Gallagher fan. He's been doing this tour with Blue Nation, which we were just talking about, where he's going to new places that he's never been before. He's touching new people, getting that sound out there. And I think, he's starting to become a real name now, isn't he?
He is, yeah. I think he's definitely a one to watch. Not one to watch, but I think he's more. I think those who knew him before absolutely fell in love with him. But he's more of a notice and a lot more people recognizing, for want of a better term, the brand of Don Martin. For want of a better term, I think he's becoming a recognizable figure on the scene, and one that people are keeping more of an eye out for and wanting to know more about.
Of course, Kira Mack, one that you were throwing out there. I mean, again, another band that's kind of coming up.
But they're the ones that seem to be doing, they've just been thinking with like Gun, supporting Gun. They're quite high up in the bill in this year's Planet Rockstock. They're doing really, really well, and they seem to be making real waves this year, both in terms of the shows that they're getting. I know they're working on the next album, and it just seems to be going really well for them. They seem to be getting a lot more. I'm seeing a lot more just generally out, and when you're out and about a gig, you kind of notice a few more Kira Mack t-shirts.
Yeah, you look around, don't you? Yeah.
Well, this is it. Like we were, I went down to Cornwall on holiday this year, and I walking along this beach in Cornwall. It was quite quiet. It was out of season. There wasn't loads of people around, and some bloke clocks my Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons t-shirt, and he's just like, "Oh, nice one, man." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, we were having a little chat." And then I looked down, and I'm like, Kira Mack t-shirt, and he had it on his sort of jacket, so he's sort of like, oh yeah, and it's just like in places where you don't, popping up in places that you don't expect it to be. So no, I feel like they've had a really good, strong year. I feel like they're really making waves. I think alongside the likes of Blue Nation, I think they could be ones where you will see them headline these festivals. I think you'll just see it. I think it's already starting to happen. They're already starting to climb the ranks. I think they are going to be on that next trajectory of people to do it. I think they have a hell of a year.
Dan Byrne, I mean, a guy that's kind of risen out from Revival Black. It feels like he's kind of started this new thing, new era. I mean, wasn't it the tail end of last year? He was kind of coming out with stuff.
Yeah, tail end of last year.
I mean, again, in the space of a year, he's been a busy guy. I mean, you look at where he is on the billing; he's starting to climb the billing again. Very similar scenario there, but of course, without releasing a full album yet or anything like that, to already be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, he had the EP, but like you say, no full album. The EP kind of a bit of a soft release, and it was, I saw him supporting Ollie Brown and the Dead Collective, March time, I think it was March, April, maybe. And it just seems to be that there's a lot of stuff going on at the time for him. He's just done the shows. Prior to, he'd done the shows with Mike Gray before. Obviously singing fronting from that, and Mike Gray's Skin, that he did some sorts of festival shows last year. But it feels like this year he's had a real year for pushing his own name out there. People of course would have known him for Revival Black and the two records that he did with those guys, which were both fucking incredible records, let's be honest. And then, but to come out with this stuff which has got his own stamp on it, his own mark on it, he's arguably one of the best voices on the scene. And I'll say that every time. And he just seems to be getting, there's so much play on Planet Rock. There's a lot of play on Planet Rock for him. He's getting, he's been back at Stillhouse twice under his own name. He's got a lot of other festivals coming up for next year already. I've noticed a few spring up already for him. No doubt more to come. He's touring all the time. He's got this debut UK solo tour coming up. It's January into February. It might even be kicking off in February next year. It just seems to be a lot going on for him. There's a lot of support and a lot of love for Dan. And I think that's showcasing, and I think that's starting to, I think when you're honest and you are true about yourselves, I think that does come across in your art, and I think people can see it. I think Dan's very honest in what he does and a very down-to-earth guy, similar to what we're saying about Blue Nation, wear heart on your sleeve kind of scenario. I've never been for, a man with a voice like Dan's, and, Bastard's got the best fucking hair I've ever seen. Lucky kid. But he's a good looking dude, and he's got a great voice on him, and he's got all the charisma up on stage and all that front that you want from a good rock front man, of that charisma and that like showmanship that we all want. We all want that, someone with a bit of swagger about them.
Yeah.
Up front. But socially, and when he's off the stage, he's really humble. He's a really sweet, nice guy,
Yeah.
And God knows you'd rather that way than the other way around. But
absolutely.
But and I think that's showing. I think people know he's a genuine guy, and he's genuine in what he talks about, what he sings about. And I think with his talent, and he's got a great band behind him. Notice he's got Colin, who was playing bass for the original lineup of Inglorious. On bass this time around, he'd played with Mike Gray as well. And it's just, with the band I saw move in Norwich was fantastic. Got a solid band. I think there's more music potentially to come next year from him. And I think there'll be a lot of even more breaking through. And he just seems to have a lot of support in a lot of good places. And I think that just comes from being a good dog guy, writing good tunes, and sort of being honest about it.
I mean, for me here in this category, I think I'm looking at this list now, and I'm edging towards Dom, because I feel that Kira Mack and Dan, both of those are doing very well, but I feel that their big breakthrough is coming, but it hasn't quite happened yet. I think obviously Kira Mack, they're going to release another album. I think maybe that might be the moment for them. I think Dan, again, when he comes to release a full album, could happen for him. I mean, they're both climbing the billing, but I'm looking at Dom and I'm seeing the rise that he's had recently in particular. Maybe not even just this year, over the last 2 years. I think he's had this very consistent rise. To be invited to go and be at the Rory Gallagher auction to
Yeah.
be asked to be there. I mean, that's kind of people in that circle obviously really respect him. He's starting to headline some festivals. He's starting to be the guy at the top of the bill. And I think we're starting to see him break through, to coin the phrase. I think I was seeing he's getting airtime on like BBC radio. I mean, that's definitely a breakthrough. When I'm looking at the wider public, not necessarily the super fans, the big music fans, the people that are kind of maybe put on the radio in the car. And they start to recognize, his voice and what he's doing. I think that gives him an edge in this category, I feel.
I wouldn't disagree with that. That's not just Shakira, Michael. Damn. I think that, wouldn't have put them forward if I didn't believe in them.
No, of course not. I mean, again, to even be nominated at this stage,
I mean,
incredible stuff. I mean, for me, I think that both of them are on the cusp of a breakthrough. They could very well be back in this category again next year, and either one of them could very well win.
Absolutely.
But I think that maybe next year for both of these acts, that could be the year that they do really break through. I think we're bubbling away. We're getting near it, but we haven't quite had it happen yet. And I think Dom, he was very close to it last year, but I think this year he's just slightly tipped over the edge.
He has had a hell of a year, like you say, between mainstream radio play and you mentioned obviously the Rory Gallagher situation over when I had him on the radio show recently. He was like thinking because he gets to play Rory Gallagher's guitar and he breaks a string.
Yeah.
Which he told me he's kept. They let him have the string, so he's kept that.
Wow.
Quite cool. He wants to do something cool with it. But I think what was more definable about Dom, perhaps, is that previously he was kind of known as this mad Rory Gallagher enthusiast. And that's what you will. I think there was a
people that were like, oh, he's a Rory Gallagher kind of guy. Like, if you like him, you'll like,
Yeah, I think there was a notion previously that it was kind of not a cover band, but
next door to a tribute.
Yeah, kind of on that verge, because obviously he's played a lot of Rory stuff in his set.
Yeah.
I mean, Rory's a huge inspiration to him and he loves his music. And fuck me, why would you not play some Rory Gallagher? But I just feel like this time around, people are less talking about the guy who sounds like Rory Gallagher and just talking about Dom.
Yes, because I've heard that. I've heard that comment now. It's who are you going to see? I'm going to see Don Martin. It's not. Oh, you like Rory Gallagher? Well, that guy that's kind of, he plays some tune. Like now, people are just like, yeah, it's Don Martin that I'm going to see, and like they know him by name. They're hoping he plays songs from his own repertoire. They're not going, I hope he plays some Rory. So he's formed his own sound. Of course, he still carries that influence, but he's got his own identity now. And I think that the wider public has started to recognize that. They're going for Don Martin. They're not going for, some kind of like, I hear that he's kind of like Rory.
Yeah.
So I think we've reached our conclusion. So the best breakthrough artist of 2024 is Don Martin. Moving on, this one's going to be a tough category. I mean, I'm just looking at the nominees. It's just ridiculous. It may be one of those that's like one of the strongest categories for this year. Best solo artist.
Oh God! Yeah.
So here we go. First up, we've got Richie Kotzen. Next, we have Philip Sace, and finally, we have Troy Redfern. I mean, wow! What a
hell of a tour, isn't it?
I mean, it's sounding like a festival billing. This
hell of a tour.
All three of these incredible in their own rights. I mean, one of the first things I will say, just looking at this list now, I think it shows the growth that Troy's had in the last few years to be put in this category now, where, you know, he's not an upcomer anymore. He's not one to watch for the future. He's doing it right here, right now. And he's been put in the same category as Richie Kotzen and Philip Sayce, two top tier musicians that are veterans. I mean, again, as we've mentioned with Philip Sayce, absolutely insane live musician. And a big year for him, of course. He's gone off with a self-released album for the first time, doing the Walls Are Coming, which has been well received. But again, Richie Kotzen, solo record that's been very well received. I mean, how do we somehow make a decision with this one? Because all three of these have had huge years.
They've all been incredible years, mate, like you say.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of which you can't even break it down to albums.
No.
Because they've all released incredible albums. They've all got a hell of a reputation on the live circuit. You can't bring into the fact that, you know, Richie's doing other projects like Smith Kotzen, because this is solo artist.
Yeah.
It's tough.
This is really hard, because I mean, like, obviously for those that will go, oh, well, you know, Richie Kotzen, he's doing things with other people, but we're talking about this year. And of course, this year he came out as a solo artist, released a solo album and did a solo tour.
And that album is phenomenal, no matter what a record.
And I mean, for me, it's one of the ones that I think has been a standout record this year. I think that it certainly offered something different. I think it was a bold move to have an album with such variety on it. You know, maybe for those that were expecting something a bit more like the Winery Dogs or Smith and Kotzen, you know, I think he's not experimented, but he's certainly allowed all of his influences to come into this record. But, you know, then again, I look at Philip Sayce, his first one that he's done virtually completely by himself. And he's just smashed it. But then I look at Troy, and Troy's had this tour with Philip Sayce. Troy's been, I mean, he's usually one of the busiest people around.
His work in terms of similarly to what we were talking about earlier, Robert John and the Wreck, you know, not only the output that he's putting out in terms of number of releases, but the sheer quality is outstanding.
I mean, he's been going out as a two-piece for the first time with Philip Sayce. And, you know, at first I was unsure about that. I was like, I don't know what that's going to be like. Because I've seen him be solo on his own, and I've seen him with a full band, but I'm not seeing him in a two-piece. And, you know, of course, you've got the drummer that stood up, and I was like, I don't know whether this is going to sound a bit like jungly. You know, like you see the drums and you think like, what? I don't know what this is going to be like. You know, is it going to be like King Kong? You know, like thumping away in the background. But you know what? It really worked well. It had this almost at times kind of slightly tribal feel, slightly Eastern vibe at points. Which he undoubtedly says. You know, we spoke a little bit afterwards, and he was saying, you know, it's kind of something that you know he was trying for the first time, and he feels it's just really worked well. I mean, the drummer, his name escapes me, but he'd never even stood up playing before this run of shows. Like he was always just kind of, you know, the guy in the drum kit, like a traditional drummer. So again, to be able to go, you know what, let's try this, even though we've never done it before for a Philip Sayce tour. Ballsy, but of course it's worked. Somehow we're going to have to make a decision. All three of these huge years. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, for me at first, I was thinking Richie Kotzen, because, you know, he's released this solo record. He's such a refined, experienced musician. But then, you know, recently, obviously, I went to the Philip Sayce gig, and then you see him live and you're like, wow. I mean, we're a couple of days later now at the point of this, and I'm still in my head. I'm still like, wow. Yeah. I mean, who are you feeling? Are you edging to anybody in particular?
I guess because again of the album and I was edging towards Richie.
Mm.
But then I started thinking about the Philip Ace record, and I remembered how cool that
That's
is.
what I'm saying.
And equally with with Troy's Invocation record, I've got another great album, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I think Troy would actually tell you to vote for Philip Ace because he's a massive Philip Ace fan.
I mean,
But
for me, regarding Troy, I think Troy has another step to him. Like he's on this journey, right? We're all on this kind of journey, and he's progressing so much in such a short period of time. As I say, only a couple of years ago, I'd have probably been looking at putting him in ones to watch category, and now he's already in a nominees for best solo artist. And I don't think this is the first time either. I think this is the second time he's been nominated.
last year.
Yeah, we either had him last year or it was the year before. It was one of those. I mean, it's again to be in this category again in such a fierce category with so much competition. But I do feel that perhaps on this occasion it could be between Philip and Richie. Like we're looking at two elite musicians. Both of them are incredible in their own right. Let's say these, for me personally, these are two of the best musicians I've ever seen live. They're certainly up there in that conversation.
Yeah.
Which makes it very difficult for me to choose because I'm like, oh my God, like of my top 3 shows that I've ever enjoyed, both of these are in there. Yeah.
If you were focusing it on this year though, and so where do you lie between those two?
It's very difficult. I mean, if I'm looking at just the record, I would be edging towards Richie Kotzen, even though I love Philip Ace's record. I feel that Kotzen pushed further into something new.
Yeah.
Like in terms of what he's done in his catalog, I think that this felt very fresh. And I think it was very bold as well. It's not necessarily the album that people would have immediately thought of. I think outside of Cheap Shots, the single, it's not what I would have imagined from Kotzen, but I think that it's fantastic. Like I love that. I love that he's done that.
Yeah.
Philip Ace, I think that it's a record that is a classic Philip Ace record. Like he does what he does best, right? And it's him on top form. He's doing what he does best. And I think I do love a lot of his records. But I think that it's perhaps one of his strongest albums that he's done. So, I mean, you've got such a, you know what I mean? Like, it's so like neck and neck here. Like, we're talking very small margins.
I almost wish it was a week's time so I've been to the Philip Ace gig and I could have
I mean, if I'm looking again though, because I've seen Kotzen, I know his level live. I know what he's capable of. But if I'm talking about just this year, in terms of solo artist, I mean, Kotzen, of course, will vary upon years. So he may be in a band next year, which I think we all know he will be.
Yeah.
Philip Ace has been consistently a solo artist for decades at this point. So I think if you're looking at the definition of a solo artist, Philip Ace fits that category more, like over a course of so many years. And I think when I saw him, he's the epitome of what a solo artist should be, I think.
There you go.
He could come out on his own, I think. He could have no other band. Like he could just play his own thing. I mean, there was moments of the show where he would literally, like the rest of the band would just stand there and he'd play, which is quite extraordinary to do. And I do feel that you're going to be in the same position in a couple of days where you're going to be going, "Oh my God." So maybe with that in mind, maybe we've reached our decision here. Maybe
I think you have, man. I think you said he was the epitome. So,
I mean, yeah, as I say, for me, he's like the classic guitar hero. So yeah, we'll go for it. We're going to do it. The best solo artist of 2024 is Philip Sace. That was a very hard one to choose. I mean, all three of these, I think, in other years probably could have won. Yeah, one of the strongest ones we've had. Moving on to best single. Of course, we've got Richie Kotzen again with This Is a Test.
A spider's web we weave. Each strand is a memory we manifest. Is it a test?
Next up, we've got Robert John and the Wreck with Ballad of a Broken Hearted Man.
Here we are, hand in hand, the ballad of a broken-hearted man.
And then finally, we have Gorilla Riot with Molotov's Sister.
Step back, don't wait, rock me today. Step back, don't wait, I want you to light my way.
Of course, Gorilla Riot, one of the ones that you threw out there. I mean, I know that you enjoyed this album they put out, but of course, the single, this was their leading single for this record, wasn't it?
it was, yeah. So it's the leading single for Salvation. And just hearing it, I mean, they've been playing it live for a couple of years. And then when they brung out the single version, it came out, I was just like, it just reminded me of again, why I fell in love with these boys. And Lucy. I should stop saying the boys. Lucy's now in the band now. Edit that out. I've already made a promise to Lucy that I'll stop referring to Gorilla Riot as the boys, or the guys. But fell in love with the band. When I first heard them, it was boys. But this is the thing what I loved on this record, and I think it showcased really well on the lead single, was since Lucy's come into the thing and come into the group and delivering her vocals to it alongside Arjan's, they work so well together. It's beautiful. I think that's why the album works as well as it does. So you had that element of the live thing. Obviously, they've been playing with Lucy for a few years now, and having that element showcased in some new material was exciting. And it was just that thing where, like, it immediately, Gorilla Riot have got this, and I said this to Deggy when I had him on the show. They've got this knack of, when you see them live, they could be playing to you, just you.
It's like a personal touch.
Yeah. And it felt like this first single had that intimacy about it. And it's an intimacy that goes throughout the whole record. But it felt like that first lead single of it, and I feel like because they've gone down this more, there's none other sort of more grungier side of what they do on this album. It's very, very singer-songwritery. It's very, there's a lot of rhythm and blues in this album. There's a lot of soul. There's still rock. There's still heavier moments, but there's this sort of Americana kind of tinge to this record that has been there on other records. It was there on their Solace EP, and it was there on certain songs on Peach. But on this album, I felt like it was really showcased. Even more, like I said to Deggy, like it was like they just stripped away and focused. I saw some other interviews where they're talking about this. Oh, it's a new avenue for you, and it wasn't a new avenue for them at all. But it was one of the avenues that was more focused on, maybe. And I felt like it just, all I really wanted to do was to be sat inside a smoky bar, having a whiskey, and listening to this entire record. And it kicked off with this single. I thought the video was wicked. That was like a lot of good fun for them to do. And it's a go-to if I'm, and I find that my favorite songs of the year become go-tos on the radio station if I'm, not necessarily mistimed something, but maybe I've misjudged the timing of that particular hour of the radio and I've got a few minutes spare. It's always, oh yeah, I'll chuck in some Gorilla Riot there,
Yeah.
and I'll chuck in Molotov. Um, and I find it works with so many different artists. You can play them after Troy, after Dom, after Blue Nation, after Philip Sace, after a host of other acts, Richie Kotzen. You could put that band that we could. I think that's why they could go in the live set. They could probably go out and support a variety of acts. But
I mean, that's something very interesting that I find. I mean, I think particularly with not necessarily a new approach, but with this avenue that they're exploring more, you could see them on one tour perhaps supporting a Blackberry Smoke,
yeah.
Then on another tour supporting somebody like even like a Dead Daisies.
Yeah, absolutely.
That level of variety. It's interesting that they're walking this kind of line that's, I think it needed to happen, because I feel that with what they've done now, it's separated them from all of these other new wave of classic rock bands, because obviously there are a lot around. It's just fierce competition, right?
Absolutely.
But they've just separated themselves from that, and it just allows you to kind of take note of them a bit more, I think. And the thing with this single is, what do you want from a single? You want like a preview of what the album is, of what's to come from that record. And I think that definitely does that.
I think
100%. Of course, though, we've got two others here. We've got Robert John and the Wreck. I mean, for me, Ballad of a Broken-Hearted Man. I mean, wow.
Definitely one of the best songs.
That for me is one of the best songs they've ever written.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, it was the favorite song off the album. So for also to be a single as well, it was, it's a tough one. But having said that, of course, Richie Kotzen with This Is a Test. I mean, that is my favorite song off that record.
Yeah.
All three of these have completely different styles, but I think they all sum up who these bands are and what these full albums are as well. I think they all kind of showcase what they're all capable of. Who are we who are you edging towards? Anybody on this one? I mean,
it's really tough. I mean, like with This Is a Test from Richie Kotzen. I mean,
oh my god,
there's a song that was born out of a demo and just literally you both said told us the same thing. Like
when he told me this story about I was like literally making this tune and then I was just singing about like doing a vocal test, and then he was like, this is like this could be a story about this, and then he just kind of runs down how he made that song, and it was so casual. It was like, well, it could be about this and this, and it's like when you're going, you're like so good, Carson, that you kind of sickened me slightly. That you can just go, I'm just going to make this class song out of a test.
I'm going to take this little bit of vocal melody on the road and just go, actually, that's fine.
Yeah, actually, there's the song.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, that for me was special. I mean, of course, it's an acoustic song, again, which we were talking about, offering something a bit different. I think Kotzen certainly does that with this song. It's not something that you hear from him all the time. It's really tough. I mean, for me personally, I think it's perhaps between Robert John and Kotzen. No discredit to Gorilla. I mean, again, for Gorilla Riot to be in this conversation in just, it's their second album. It's, only a handful of singles because, of course, only 2 albums. to already be in this nomination of best single shows their progress. I mean, look at the competition. You know, you've got two very experienced bands. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at Kotzen, I'm looking at Robert John. Is there? I mean, both of them. I'm my favorites from the album, as well as being favorite singles there.
I mean, for me,
Mm,
the Robert John, brilliant track,
mm,
but not necessarily my favorite on the album, personally.
right. Okay.
I think it's a great track, and I think it's one of the best he's ever written, or they've ever written, I should say.
Mm,
But I'm more edging between Gorilla Riot and Richie.
really interesting.
Yeah, just on hunch, nothing more than hunch and just
Mm.
taste, I guess. It's such a tough category, it really
It
is.
is. It's a really hard category. But I mean, this is the thing with this show, because uh, when people go, "How did they reach this conclusion?" Even if you don't necessarily agree with it, you can see how tough it is to make these kind of choices. I mean, somehow we're going to have to make a
Yeah.
choice on which one we're going to go for. I mean, but all of these, I think, could be deserving winners in their own right for different reasons.
Tough. I mean, I think for me, for Guerrilla Riot to come out with Molotov
Mm,
and showcasing just what they've been worked on for so long
mm,
because of everything that happened with Peach in the previous release and everything else, coming out mid lockdown and or just before the lockdown kicked off and everything. And this album had been built up quite sustainably in terms of they've been working on it for quite a long time.
mm.
They were waiting for the right moment to release it. And then they came out with Molotov Sister, and I was just like, they're back, they're back, they're
Right.
there, and they're better than they've ever been. Um, Seen them a couple of times since this year, and it's something there. But with Richie to come out with one of the most class songs of the year out of like you say, a
Have a
vocal
test. Yeah.
And like when he was saying, oh, and I was saying, oh, I'm really liking this because it was one of my favorites off the record as well.
Yeah.
And then I was speaking to him for the thing, and I was like, well, where did this song come from? And particularly, I'm really enjoying this record, but
Mm.
particularly like for me, like this is a test, and a couple other tracks on the album as well. But when I was speaking to him about that, and he went, oh well, I had this thing, and I was trying to write it down, and then I was going on tour, so I just wanted to capture the vocal melody, so I just started singing "This Is a Test," and I was going, "Is he
Yeah.
taking the piss?" Like,
Yeah.
like
It's a
what?
joke, isn't it? I mean, I think that it's certainly a showcase without him realizing. I think it's a showcase of his sheer talent
Absolutely.
to be able to do that. I mean, maybe because it's like knowing the inception of this song, knowing how it's been done,
Mm.
maybe that changes it. Maybe that's what gives it the edge.
Maybe it does. I mean, for that to come out of nothing,
Mm.
just like I've got this and that, and then you've got tracks on the album like Insomnia and stuff, which have got these great vocal harmonies, and only Richie Kotzen could write a song with three bass lines in it, and even as a bass, you know.
Yeah.
And I was
Not
there.
sound like Spinal Tap.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Um, on
Tough, isn't
balance
it?
of everything, I might be leaning to Richie.
Mm.
I mean, I just think this whole record Richie came out of
It's like out of nowhere, isn't it?
out of nowhere. Like we're
Mm,
both fans of Richie, and we're used to him doing more, stuff with the Winery Dogs, and even his solo
mm.
stuff that has been more straight up, I guess.
Yeah.
And this whole album is so different in its tonality. There's a lot more rhythm and blues and soulful aspects to it vocally. There's tracks on it that are verging on acoustic. I mean, Cheap Shots is kind of the exception to the rule. That
Mm.
might be a bit more what people are expecting. It's so tough, man, because
I
keep
think
going. And then
I
it's
think
like I've got Guerrilla
yeah.
Riot Boys on my shoulder going, "Oh,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
for me, I'm thinking because, maybe if I just heard these songs, I might edge towards another one. But I feel that perhaps knowing how he's made that song, um, and I don't think he realized when he was talking about it, like how that showcases how he works, how he thinks.
yeah,
And it's just complete, like I don't know any other musician that's done that.
no,
Which to me kind of elevates it to this kind of special tier. Because I said to him at the time, I said, it's this beautiful song. It just feels really heartfelt. And he said, going, you know what? I came up with it when it was a test, an
yeah."
audio test. I mean, come on. Have we kind of, has he
I think
slightly edged it?
I think possibly because if anyone can, excuse me, if anyone can, come up with a song that good from
From a
a
test?
throwaway
Yeah.
audio test, I think he's edging it.
Mm.
It's tough, but I think he's edging it.
It's really tough. I mean, again, all three of these definitely worth going to listen to. But I think we've reached our conclusion by, such a fine margin. The best single of 2024 is Richie Kotzen with "This Is a Test" that was born from a test. Of course, we've reached that point now where, this is the one that everybody's been waiting for. Of course, the best album of 2024. For those that will be kind of confused, they'll be thinking, yeah, but Ryan, you've done your top 10 of the year. Yes, we have done a top 10 of the year, but we did our personal choices kind of for different reasons. We kind of pick things. But for this one, we're looking from a different standpoint. We're looking at kind of more of a critical standpoint of like, what was the best one of the year? Not necessarily just our personal feeling, but we account everything. We put everything into account, right?
Yeah.
Reviews, everything, just the whole board. So the nominees for this one, for the first time ever, we're going to do 4 nominees. We're not going to do 3. We're going to have 4. We're going to have an extra one. We of course have Richie Kotzen with Nomad. Next up, we've got Blue Nation with Ordinary People. Next up, we have Rambling Preachers. And then finally, the first ever 4th entry, we do have Massive Wagons with Earth to Grace. Of course, you threw in Massive Wagons. So, I wanted to honor that and include that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, rather than just going, no, I'm throwing that in the bin. Because I do think that it's been a big year for them. They've charted with this record.
Yeah, real big charting record for them. The songs on this album are insane. I only really started digging into it deeply after we recorded our top 10 albums of the year. So otherwise, it definitely probably was going to end up being in my top 10, But hindsight's a wonderful thing. But
this gives the second chance maybe to kind of reconsider that.
This is it. And I just think, a band like Massive Wagons, like we were talking about, the Crows earlier, and I mentioned Wagons there and saying, those two are probably like the top 2 bands of this newer wave of bands of the last sort of 5 to 10. They just seem to be going from strength to strength. I think like it would easy for them to be a bit stalematey by now, a bit knowing their craft and sticking to it. It feels like they've really branched their wings on this album without like losing their identity on it. You hear it and it's still unmistakably the Wagons, but there's quite a lot of depth into this record. Maybe some more so that previous albums, which I've obviously adored, but you've had things like the Curry song and stuff like that, and good fun rock and roll, which is sometimes exactly what you want. and only I think only Wagons could have written the Curry song and it'd be good. You know what I mean? Because when they said they were doing it to me, I was like, "You've written a song about going for about a curry," and I'm like, "We
You
all like the
think,
curry."
oh no, yeah.
And then you hear and you're like, "This is genius." This is absolutely genius, and it's amazing. But with Earth the Grapes, it's just there's something about it that feels like a step up at this point in their careers. It feels like, don't want to use the term more grown up because that's no one wants grown up rock and roll.
I understand
But
what you
like a
mean, though.
more
It's
fuller figures feels like more
a
fresh.
mature sound,
Yeah, like a more
like just from experience. There's
a
so
more
many albums
experienced
deep.
sound might be a better term for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like using the term grown up rock and roll because us rockers don't like to grow up, and you just feel like that's just it's a bit of an oxymoron. But but definitely a more experienced record, and I feel like
Mm,
it's a more fleshed out record as well.
mm.
Um, and I think Baz's vocals on this album, particularly, are really, really strong. Possibly the strongest I've ever heard him sing. Um, and I don't know if they're trying new techniques in the studio or what, but from everyone, it just seems everything's kind of lifted up a bit,
Mm.
and it feels like a pinnacle album. It feels like one of those albums where it's a milestone album in their career.
Yeah, yeah.
You'll have probably a band will have a few of them along the lines. You'll have it in the debut and you'll have it in other albums that mean a lot along the way. And obviously, this album's only been out a couple of weeks, but I feel that, and I've seen some stuff where people saying it's rustled some feathers because it's too polished or it's too this.
Mm.
But when you change things up and when you do things
There's a
slightly,
risk.
it's
Yeah.
always a risk, and you do an album. It's the classic thing is that do you do an AC/DC and have people going, oh well, it all sounds like Back in Black, and it doesn't, or do you do like a David Bowie and try different things throughout your career, or somewhere in between? Things that you're always going to be you, and I don't think anyone could ever accuse Wagons of doing anything that wasn't them.
Yeah.
They're not that bad to not do it. And I just feel like this album, it's got a vibe about it. There's something special here. I've not maybe managed to digest it like some of the other albums I have in this list as much, but there's definitely something here. It feels like a milestone album. And for that, I had to put it forward.
It felt different this time around. I always have a look at, you see bands that go, oh, here's the midweek chart. And you're always kind of waiting because obviously midweek, right? There's still the rest of the week to go. You're waiting for the drop because obviously you're competing against $1 million artists, right?
Yeah.
Like it's such tough competition. But it didn't really drop, did it?
No, really didn't.
I mean, can you remember where it ended up? It ended up really high.
Like 3 or 4, maybe?
I was going to say, I want to say 3 because it obviously like to do that this many albums deep, that just shows that they're still growing. There's a whole new group of people that have obviously been introduced to them because how else do you get a top 3 record? Yeah, I mean, it certainly has to be in the conversation. But of course, we have 3 others here as well. Rambling Preachers, of course.
I sounded like it was number 4.
Yeah. So, but number 4. I mean, top 4 again. That's huge.
Massive.
Yeah, massive. To pardon the pun, but I can hear the collective groan. But of course, we have 3 others. Obviously, Rambling Preachers. For me, it was one of those. I was looking at when we were doing the top 10 of the year. I initially put it in at number 10, and then it became number 9, then it became number 8.
Yeah.
And it eventually climbed its way right the way up to like number 6. And for me, again, it's like the more you listen to it, the more it climbs up your list because I mean, number one, it surprised many people. You know, a lot of people didn't even know who they were before they released this record. Obviously, a lot of people are going to shows based off the back of this. It's getting them real attention already. So we felt, well, I know I felt that it had to be at least in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, it's a debut album and look at the progress they've made off just one release. I mean, they're in the conversation here with Richie Kotzen, Massive Wagons. You know, that's unbelievable for a new band. Of course, you know, speaking of kind of upcomers, you've got Blue Nation as well. Of course, that was at the time your number one in the top 10 of the year. Again, it's, you know, it for me it felt like if you're new to Blue Nation, this is the perfect one to kind of go, this is who they are. Again, it was very much like the Rambling Preachers. It's like that stamp. It's like,
This is who we are. This is what we do.
Exactly. A very similar thing there. But of course, again, we spoke about Richie Kotzen with Nomad, and you know we've kind of kept coming back to him throughout this award show because he's come out with this record again, kind of from nowhere, really. And for me personally, it was my number one in the top 10 because I think that it, out of all of the releases this year, it's the most varied release, and I always look for an artist that kind of pushes for something a bit different. That's a very tough category, isn't it?
Another tough one, mate. Yeah.
I mean, initially, is there anybody that sticks out to you? Is there anybody that you're thinking this could be the one?
I mean, I guess initially,
all of these are critically acclaimed. All of them have got very good reviews. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We could be going for it. I mean, we've obviously got people that are very experienced, but we've got some newcomers as well.
I mean, it's tough. Again, I don't know why we keep doing this to ourselves every year.
I know it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is really tough. I think. I mean, initially, I'm going back to my initial choice of Blue Nation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is just a reflex. I think you'll be going back to Richie Kotzen and your
yeah. I mean, you initially think of that one from the top 10,
but
you look at. I mean, for me, I'm looking at Rambling Preachers, and I'm thinking they just kind of shocked me with how good it was. You know, I knew that they were a good band, but then you hear this and you go, well, hang on a minute, there's something special there. Like they're not just good, they've got real potential. Again, to just be in this conversation already shows, you know, the growth that they are. I mean, Wagons, of course, you know, top 4.
Top 4 album, it's had a huge impact.
Yeah.
I think for at this point in their career to come and whether, like you said, you know, I've seen people saying, oh, it was too polished and these kind of things. I think no matter what your opinion is of the record, to come out on an album this point in their career, I mean, they're 6, 7 albums deep.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Around there. And to come out and still have a surprise factor about you. I think, you know, stereotypically, I think a lot of people would have thought, oh, we know what we're going to get from a Wagons album.
Yeah.
And they've always had a massive fun element to them. You know, they've always had that kind of that slant to their music with songs like Curry Song, for example. But you know, you see like stuff like you know, Banging in the Stereo and all those kind of the tracks and you know, Mr. Balloonhead and stuff like that. You know, it's they've had it throughout this fun element. And I think what's hit me about this album the last couple of weeks has been the fact that it is so different to what they've done. And I love the fact that they've still retained their sound, still sounding like Wagons. Having this, like I say, feels like a milestone album. and with that, this point in their career, having a big impact on the wider mainstream in terms of that #4 album and the album chart. They're currently on the tour with the album. The shows, particularly in Rock City, look fucking incredible, frankly, from the sort of footage I've seen. And they feel like they've really, we can talk about growth from like an initial inception to your debut, like with Rambling Preachers. And I think it's easy to focus on the growth a band does at that initial inception, while they're still making their mark. But I think it's almost harder sometimes to do that growth
down the line, yeah.
Down the line when you've got that name and people had come to expect certain things from them. And they've come out with an album that people might not have expected from them necessarily. Like I say, it's a bit more of an experienced record. It's still fun and it's still got those elements about them. They've got some more serious songs on the album as well, of course. A couple of songs on there about the whole mental health thing that we've spoken about previously.
Yeah.
And I just think it's made a real impact already. And I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. I'm kind of edging towards Wagons at the minute.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, we've got your other choice there, Blue Nation. I'm looking at, for me, this is like almost like a best of the last few years. Of course, they've got some new material in there as well, but they've got some stuff that was on some other very successful EPs that they've all put together. For me, I think I'm looking at who it's between. I'm looking at either Kotzen or Wagons, maybe. For completely different reasons. I think that these are the two most experienced. I think that the Rambling Preachers and Blue Nation have done incredible to get in, to just be in this conversation. I think it shows just how good they've been.
Yeah.
But we've got two artists that are very experienced, I think, at this point. As I say, to get a chart-topping record this further down in album releases, as I say, it does show that you can, they haven't stagnated. They haven't just got that circle of fans, then that's where they've kind of remained. They've obviously grown, because there's no way that you can chart without growth. But then I'm looking at Kotzen, and he's thrown something out there that, I mean, at the start of the year, I didn't even know he was bringing anything out.
No, I didn't.
It's he's very quietly kind of put his ducks in a row and then just kind of released this thing. I mean, obviously last year he had the Winery Dogs release with 3. And then he's, again, rather than do more of the same, he's come out and released something quite different. It's very difficult, this one, isn't it? I mean, God. I mean, again, if those in the comments, are you edging towards anybody in particular, or is there anybody out there that we've missed? But I mean, we're going to have to reach some kind of conclusion. I mean, me personally, I'm slightly looking at Kotzen because it felt like a show. I mean, it's an individual as well. I mean, obviously, Wagons as a team there, they're all very valuable in that team. Whereas with Kotzen, it's virtually on his own. He's just quietly released the same. I mean, he even plays the other instruments on the record, doesn't he? Apart from the drums, I believe.
I think even on certain drum tracks he played.
Yeah.
2 songs where he didn't do the drums.
I think there's a couple of segments, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, that's quite extraordinary. Like it's nearly a completely literally self-made record.
Yeah, done a lot of production. I don't think he did the mastering. I think he got someone to do that.
Yeah, but like in terms of coming up with those ideas, in terms of playing those instruments, obviously he's had some help along the way, of course. But that initial inception, I'm just feeling that maybe that's something there. You know, it's like an extra thing, isn't it? Like that's just extra impressive. Yeah, because it's so difficult doing something. I mean, you know, I've spoke with a couple of solo artists, and when they're doing something on the, you know, it's all on them, right? They've got nobody to bounce off. And, you know, when you've got that, it's like you're just in a room on your own, really. I mean, of course, you know, you can probably ask your producer, but like, it's still ultimately you, isn't it? Like, there's no thing of like, oh, what do you think to this? You know, and then somebody else goes, oh, how about this? It's like, it's just him.
It's just him.
You know, I feel I'm probably, me personally, I feel like I'm edging slightly towards him. I don't know about you.
I think keep coming back to Richie. We both had him pretty high up. I mean, he was your number one. I'm still high up, my number 10. There is something magical about this album.
It's just like it's just so different. I mean, I know he was saying, you know, obviously there's influences. You know, he has like bits of funk. He has bits of kind of jazz influences. You know, you can hear them all in there. But I think in this day and age, to come out with something that felt very different to anything else this year, it's really tough, isn't it? You know, at this point, because, you know, like a lot of people always say, don't they? They go, well, everything that's been played, you know, over the year, you know, it's all been done before. It's, you know, whereas this felt fresh.
It did feel really fresh. The combination of influences from him across the board on it and everything else.
Yeah. Like I felt like pulling from other genres almost, and combining this together. You know, I mean, on paper that should sound terrible. You know, it should be Spinal Tap's Jazz Odyssey. It should be awful. You know, but it this really worked.
It does, you know,
work. And I don't know. I couldn't help but admire that.
I think we made our decision, mate.
I think we have. I mean, credit to Wagons. I mean, wow, to get as a top 4 album, unbelievable. But I mean, to all of these that are in this category, check out all of these releases, because I mean, if they're in this conversation, they're the best of the year.
Yeah.
But very, you know, by a whisker, we've gone for it. The best album of 2024 is Richie Kotzen with No Man. And with that, we have finally concluded this year's award show. I mean, if you've stuck with us right the way through, I mean, I don't know what time this is going to come in at, but we're credit where due. Of course, you know, these ones are always a long one, but you know, we've got lots of big things coming in the new year. Of course, you know, this comes out right near the end of the year. You know, just to kind of reflect, I mean, it's been an insane year for me personally. I mean, the guests that's come on have been insane. Like so many people that I've kind of admired since I was a kid, or you know, even as a teen. You know, people that you just think are completely unattainable. Have just been turning up at my door. You know, they've been beamed into my little house. But of course, you know, without people listening and watching, you know, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you very much for that. You know, thanks to Lee, obviously here, you know, he sticks with me doing these ridiculously long videos. You know, he's helped me with some guests this year. I mean, you know, some of the ones that I've struggled to get, you know, Richie Kotzen being one of them. So he's helped facilitate that. So credit where due. And of course, you know, I'm sure you've got big things planned for next year as well.
You know, it's radio show, we're trying to push that, and you know, you know, it goes back and forth, mate. You mentioning, you know, the Richie Kotzen thing, but you set me up with some guests as well. You know, we done that and support each other. We've done it since, you know, since the day dot, since we met each other and that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you know, we'll support each other and continue to do so. One of these days when we do a top 10, I'll remember everyone that I want to mention.
Yes. I mean, I think it's a running theme. I think the at this point the audience would be disappointed if you if you didn't get. Everybody's waiting for it.
But you know,
It's
good year
yeah.
ahead. You know, next year's 10th anniversary of Just Push Play, so that's
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
6 years on air, so it's all a bit crazy, but all good, man.
Yeah, it's always going to happen. So keep an eye out. Of course, you will see as it appears now the link for Lee's channel as well. You can check out Lee's videos, and of course, you know, stick around with here as well. If you're on Spotify and you're listening, we had an astronomical amount of people listen. I mean, we are currently, I mean, it may be higher by the time this comes out, but we're in the top 20% on Spotify of podcasts just on the platform full stop, which still kind of blows my mind. If you're on there, come over to YouTube because it's cooler over here, right? You get to see us, you get to do, you know, you get extra added things that you don't necessarily get on Spotify. Come over and join the party. So, but with that, concluding the year. Yes, stick with us. And we'll see you in the new year.